I sent other people a note and realized, well, shit, it's after 10 o'clock. Oh,
No, it ain't.
what it is back here, it ain't out there. In God's country, it's still, what, 8:02 or something.
No.
There we are. Good morning,
Good
Carol.
morning, everybody.
Morning. Oh, let me turn that
Harold
off.
and Tina. Good morning.
Now I got it.
I'm trying to choke down a ham sandwich.
About made me choke. I didn't
Good
have
morning, Mr. Chuck.
Morning, Chuck. I didn't see Chuck pop in. But I'm doing something else at the moment. So
Well, he just popped in.
Now, morning, Chuck. Things are getting tight, Chuck. We're down to what, 3 weeks of hockey left before it all gets exciting.
You've been talking about more than you did rodeo.
Well, that's because I can see more of that right now than I can rodeo. I don't have rodeo channels right at the moment.
I thought you got.
I did. Well, I did, but funny you should ask about that.
Because you can watch that all the time.
Well, yeah, I could have, and I did sometimes. No, I had the cable company. It's been the god awfulest mess. The cable company that I got hooked up out here, which is high speed stuff that I can get for doing this internet show. That I signed up for them for 2 reasons. One, they had good speeds with fiber optic cables, and they'd hook me up. Right. And 2, they had Cowboy Channel and things that had rodeo on it. So I had that out here, and I was going to hook it up at the house. Well, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got an email from them and said they're gonna quit doing TV, the cable stuff. They're gonna do the internet. I can still stay on their internet. It's high speed, but they're gonna quit doing the TV and everything. So I just called and said, well, just cut it off. I don't need it then.
You can just stream everything.
Well, I'm gonna stream. Yeah, that's exactly.
Which drives me crazy. But there you go. I just want to turn on pull the knob out and twist the turner. And all that. There it is. There's the Cowboy Channel. Click.
It says, did you trim the bottom of your face as well as the top of your face?
I don't think you did.
Well, yeah, a couple of weeks ago I did. It's been this way for.
Well, you trimmed the top of your head, but I don't think you trimmed your face.
Well, no, good point. No, I didn't trim my face. Brenda, I did trim just a little bit off. My beard was a little bit longer, but it was scraggly at the bottom. So she trimmed that for me. Of course, I couldn't see how much she cut off.
She dressed it up a little bit.
She dressed it up a little bit, but it's going to come back out. Tim, I hope your Vols do it. Let's see here. Where you at?
Not sure. I'll stay up to watch.
They played last night, Carol. They won last night. They beat last night. Let me think. Let me get my days right. That might have been Thursday night. And the team they beat, I can't remember the name of it. It was one of the smaller colleges that plays good basketball, I guess.
Oh, we're talking basketball. I was going to ask you what the heck sport you were even talking about.
It's basketball right now. Tennessee's actually had a pretty good basketball team, and their women won. Now the women did win last night. They beat. Maybe they were the ones that played Wolford or somebody named Wolf something. And I can't remember who Tennessee played. Both of them won. They're 10:30s tonight. Okay. I don't even know who they're playing. I don't keep up with it that much. This is tournament time is the only time I keep up with college basketball or basketball period. I don't watch basketball.
I they're probably some of the greatest athletes in the world, except they don't have a 2,000-pound ball on top of them. But they're probably some of the greatest athletes in the world. But I'm 5'8".
So that's a big
And I had zero interest in the whole deal. Unless they get into a big brouhaha out there on the court, to me it's like watching paint dry.
Well, I don't. I mean, two sports that come on TV that to me don't do anything but mess up everything else I want to watch, and that's basketball
and soccer.
Soccer. I can't stand either one of them. Oh, they play UCLA tonight at 9:40, Carol, my time. So, well, that would be 8:40. At least that's what it's showing on this.
Ask my wife when PBR gets delayed because of women's basketball or soccer.
I hate that.
What my mood's like then.
and they don't. Nobody cares if it's rodeo. Nobody gives a crap if you don't. They don't figure you need to see the first half. They'll just let basketball. We'll show basketball, or we'll show that stupid game where they kick the ball around. I mean, who gives a crap about that?
That's how I look at the world, but not everybody does that. So,
well, no, but when it comes to that drives me nuts when like I said, that's the two sports that seem to always
PBR was delayed by like a half an hour for women's basketball, and I'm like,
oh, short face.
I just got to go somewhere else when that happens.
I know what you meant now when you said if you cut your face off. I put short face bear on there because that's one of the creatures.
That's one of the creatures.
I think we're in the same time one time.
We're Eastern.
Are you guys Eastern?
What?
No, I'm talking to Carol. I was asking if she was Eastern time. I thought they were Central. I bet that don't mean anything. Maybe you don't do time changes or something. I don't know. I don't know who does what anymore. But anyway, I hope they do well. For a long time the women were great, and then Pat Summitt had to quit, so that went kind of downhill. And then the men were the men sucked at basketball for so long.
Morning, Miss K.
I felt sorry for them because the women got all the glory, which was fine. I actually thought that was good too, but then they both kind of went down in the toilet, and now they're both back up some. So, but once they fall out, again, like I said, once they drop out of the tournament, I'll probably quit watching the tournament. In fact, I didn't even watch all their games. I watched some of their games, but I was interested to see them win. I can't help but pull for them a little bit, but when football comes back on, then I'll be ready to go. Good morning, Miss Kay. I'm sorry I didn't say hi. So what's the weather like out there today, buddy?
Well, it's about 32. It's totally overcast, and the wind's screaming about 400 million miles an hour.
Well,
it's been blowing terrible all spring or all.
Yeah, you've mentioned that.
I know you guys have been getting some winds and things, and
but not like you.
It's just absolutely constant, and it wears on you after a while.
The first time I ever went, not the first time I ever went west, but the first time I spent any time in prairie or plains / prairie country was part of Oklahoma, and
it never gave you a break.
I was up on the top of wing of an airplane, sitting out on the ramp, the tarmac, and I had dirt and sand up every part of my body, and then my tools and tool bag and tool kit, and it blew constantly. I was so ready to get off, to get out of it. It wouldn't have been so bad if I hadn't been sitting out in it all day long, all
Right.
day for a week. But yeah, it don't. You got. I mean, we've had some really nasty winds, but it's short gusts or storms. Whereas you get it, and it's just like a river flowing through constantly.
It's just whistling like crazy right now. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it's just blowing, and the sky is lead and gray, and
Nice use of the word there.
it's. I thought you would appreciate that.
I read that
And,
word, but I don't use it a lot.
and it's yeah, it's just gross looking out there today. And we're gonna go after this deal. We're gonna go to the grand city of Rock Springs, and
Oh boy,
they got a big mule deer conference going on over there, and we're gonna go over there. And my son's working at it, and so we're gonna go over there and pick up the daughter-in-law and the grandchildren's from Green River and go to Rocket City and go to the mule deer deal.
might be interesting.
And I was just checking the weather before I got on with you. I was like, make sure it wasn't gonna like blizzard on us or something, but it's just supposed to rain apparently. But
Well, that tell Tina about what a mule deer conference amounts to.
well, it's a gathering of folks that care about mule deer and the species Odocoileus hemionus. And so Samuel invited me over and said, hey, I got to work this conference this weekend. And do you want to come talk to the people that made your life miserable for 35 years?
Why, sure. Oh,
And I'm like, well, why not? So,
Are you talking at the conference? Or
no. I'm just going. I'm just going to see my old homies. That's all I'm going for. So
Kay says the wind's playing havoc with my security cameras, blowing everything and in front of it. Watching leaves is not as much fun as watching the raccoons. Unless the raccoons go flying by, Kay, and then that would probably be hilarious. If the wind gets up that high, let us know.
I still remember they're always hilarious. Coons are hilarious.
Hey, speaking of that, I went out yesterday.
Grandpa used to give my coon a sugar cube, and she'd go over there and wash it in the dog bowl. and of course, it disappeared, and she'd just get violently angry about the whole thing.
Yesterday, a couple of days ago, we went to town for therapy, and we drove by the library. I can't remember why I dropped by there, but we drove by the library, and out front was a great big sign by the road, and it said book sale this weekend. 21st and 22nd or something like that. And
Tim Pruitt, there's a book sale.
My wife said something to the effect of, oh God. Anyway, so yesterday morning I got up and I left Brenda here and I went to the book sale. And it wasn't huge, but of course 3 or 4 books followed me home. Can I keep them? And I'll show you one in a minute that I thought was kind of cool.
I figured you got there and it was like boxes and boxes and boxes of moldy Harlequin romances or whatever.
Well, there was the one of the books I grabbed. Hang on a minute.
Well, don't you need a jet engine on the back of that deal, dude?
This is a free. Now this one was free, and I'm all about free books to a good home. But I thought this was cool, Mark. This is this is a year's worth, and
Really?
this one is but this is a year's worth of 1961 Florida Wildlife magazines, which
Which one? Tennessee Wildlife?
Same kind of idea. But these were Florida. And the only reason I picked them
Oh,
up,
Florida, not
I
Tennessee.
wanted to read about the gators and things down there. So I got to looking through it. You'd appreciate though, because it's all pretty much black and white or very basic color, and they've got know your Florida fishes, for example. Here's a whole display about shiners, golden shiners, silk gold. Well, that's a big golden shiner. Caledonian something or another. I guess minnows, button minnows, top minnows, all kinds of ways to hook your minnow to fish with. I mean, and you don't just. Oh, here's a guy fishing, line drawing, pencil drawing of a guy fishing. Got his bait hooked.
I like one of them old 1960s cartoons.
Exactly, and I thought, man, I can't pass it up, and it was free. Look here at this snake identification part. I can't see it.
Perfect.
I saw a picture yesterday. Speaking of this, of somebody had there's a Tennessee snake identification page group on the Facebook, and but it seems like lately the snakes are all somewhere else. People were saying, I thought this was a Tennessee snake ID page, but anyway, there was a picture of what looked to me like a very large eastern diamondback in the water, swimming in the water. And they were like saying, what kind of snake is this? It wasn't here. It was in Florida. And I said, that's an eastern diamondback. That's what that is. That's a body. And those guys, they get big.
That's the largest venomous snake in the Western Hemisphere.
Yes, yeah. And they some of them get over 10 feet long. They're huge.
And 10 or 12 pounds.
Yeah. That would be way more snake than you really want to pick up. I'll tell you that.
That big around. I mean, way bigger than your thigh, like the size of your waist.
Check this out. For example, shooting pheasants on the wing with a bone arrow.
Pheasant fun.
So, I picked that up for free. I thought, man, I kind of like that. I'm going to have to. I wish it was I don't even know Tennessee had a wildlife magazine in '61. In fact, I'm almost positive they didn't. But it's just a book. You don't see stuff done like this, anymore. It's
so if you look at the old Pennsylvania Game Commission issues, they're just like that.
Yeah.
And they might have been the same artist.
Well, it could have been because they all look alike.
Speaking of which, I got to do a moose and a cow and a calf moose drawing. Don't let me forget that.
Okay. I got to catch up here real quick.
I got to do it this weekend again.
What, you got to do one for somebody?
Yeah, for one of my homies, he needs to make a sign.
Oh, I didn't finish my story.
Let the public know that they need to
watch out for them.
Watch out. Beware, be bear aware, kind of thing.
So anyway, let me finish. So yesterday I was driving home, and there's this, as you come in from Rogersville and up to where we live, you got to cross the ridge and drop back down in this valley that we're in here with the creek down here.
Yeah.
And as you come over that ridge, you can see way up through here. I mean, it's a great view. And I want to take a picture. I want to get a picture of it, but it's hard. There's no place to stop there along the road. It's narrow and it's a downhill, twisty, like a mountain road. And
Right.
and as you're going along there, there's just enough trees in the way to, get in the way of a decent picture. So I thought yesterday maybe I can drive down here and, get over here off on a side road and maybe I can take another picture. So first, there's only a couple of roads that turn off to the right. So I did, and I'm dropping down through there, and I'm just kind
Morning,
of
John.
I dropped down into the creek bottom again, the same creek that goes by down here below us. And I saw something walking in the field, and I thought, what in the heck? So I backed. There wasn't anybody up behind me, so I backed up, and the fence row was kind of in my way, and I kept looking, and here it is again. And I swear to you, buddy, I think it might have been one of the biggest possums I've ever seen.
Huh?
And it was walking along.
Did you just say possum?
Because I knew you'd appreciate it.
I do.
Possum.
Creature. That's a possum.
When you stick it with a stick, sharp pointy stick. Anyway, it's the biggest possum I think I've maybe ever seen on the hoof. And a car then pulled up behind me, so I couldn't sit there and I wanted to take a picture of it because it's just a big old pie. It looked like a coon waddling down through there, but it wasn't.
So, I don't know how many years ago, the wife and I went to John Wayne's birthplace in Winterset, Iowa, which is the same county that the bridges of Madison County are in. So all those old covered bridges are in that county. Yeah. So I got to go like hang out with John Wayne for a long time. And then we wandered about the country looking for these bridges and got to see several of them. And but when we got there, the birthplace museum and his house, they weren't open. It was too early in the morning.
Yeah.
And so we just went wandering about looking for bridges or whatever, and we just south of the house that John Wayne was born in, there was a ginormous possum, road killed, brand new, fresh road killed, laying on the road. And it was cold. It was cold, cold, cold. And I'm like, I need to take that. I can use that for something back in Wyoming.
Were you driving home?
We were driving home. Dad had sold me a pickup truck, and we were driving home. We flew there and drove back, and it was. Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna need that.
Speaking of that, I got to read you. It's
marsupial stew. John's.
Hey, John, that's a good big word.
He was like this long, like snout to tail, not the end of his tail, just to the base of his tail. He was a big one.
Kay said she saw John Wayne's house in Mexico way back in the 80s. Yeah, I can't remember. Where's that at, Kay? I've read about that house, but I don't remember where it is down there. Isn't it on the coast or west coast area of Mexico, which is where a lot of folks go live, I guess now. I got my daughter and her husband went to Wisconsin this week for something. I don't know if it was a family event. He's getting ready to start a new job, so maybe it was his last chance to go.
Cheese curd eating
world.
beer drinking and cheese curd eating contest.
And the first message I got here from her, let's see. I don't think I even got one that says we're leaving or anything. She said, this was after they got in there when she said, getting me some free supplies up here at the farm. She said, I got me a mummified cat and a possum and she actually spelled opossum and a few skulls so far. She's
So
up
what?
there.
That's Kelly.
That's Kelly. For
I
her
thought, I thought she was married up to a. No, is that Jen that's married up to the Cajun?
Yeah, Jen's married up to the Cajun.
Got it.
Kelly's married up to a curd eater.
A curd eater.
Most of his family's down here now, so I'm not sure where they went up or what the occasion was, but like I said, maybe they were just busy. But the note
some skulls.
The note that Dad got wasn't, "Hey, we're here having a great time." It was, "Hey, getting me some possums and some skunk or a cat and some other stuff." I mean, that's my girl.
That is your girl.
That's exactly right.
That's your girl. Skulls is cool.
Skulls is cool. Okay, here's how I want to do the show today. I'm going to kind of go through this and we can hit some highlights. Well, I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but then when I finish, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time going through all my slides so we can talk about them. Then after, I'd like to get in depth a little bit about the issues, which is probably partly why I've even brought this whole thing up. And I'm going to open the show just so we can get that part started. So I put down, I think I put down that this was going to be a East versus West kind of day. And what I'm talking about there is the hypothesis of how the Americas were populated. Well, it's not, some of it's not hypothesized anymore. I mean, we pretty much know, but there's some controversy about some of it that on one hand makes no sense to me at all. And on the other hand goes back to how some of the stuff we've talked about, how hard it is to change the paradigms, as you called them yesterday, from what we've been told all of our life to maybe what really happened. Paradigms. So let me get my screen up on.
You're getting in the way of my paradigm. There's a lot of that in that field of science.
Yeah, archaeology. What Mark and I have been talking about. It seems like archaeologists have a real hard time changing. Maybe that fits. I mean, they deal with a lot of stuff in stone and buried in the ground, and maybe that's why they just don't like to change. I mean, you think I don't like change? Woo! They don't like it at all.
Yeah, we came up with this hypothesis, which is a testable question, basically. That's all hypothesis.
Yeah, that's what a hypothesis is. So,
and everybody uses theory,
which is
incorrect. Hypothesis, which drives me absolutely batty.
Well, you can ask.
You don't have a theory yet. Until you prove the hypothesis, you do not have a theory.
No, people get that really mixed up.
It really drives me batty.
There's
just two words: hypothesis and theory. Just like.
So she can tell you that every time I hear that word on TV I always start yelling at the TV screen. It ain't a theory; it's a hypothesis.
Carol's going to use paradigm in her next paper.
Well, good. We have done our job.
we have accomplished our, exactly.
What was the, hang on. I've been watching.
You can't walk on your lap.
There's this lady on YouTube that does these shorts. She's an Appalachian gal, and so she has a pretty thick mountain accent, and she's always talking about the Appalachian word of the day. One of them was botany. Yes, one day this week it was botany, and she always uses it in a sentence. And she said, "Hey, honey, is there?" I was looking in the fridge for some milk, but doesn't look like you bought any this week.
Botany
Botany this week. There was another one this morning I really liked about deer in the yard, and I can't remember what she said. Anyway, Tina's saying, aren't they the same? Oh, what's the same thing? Theory and hypothesis? No, they are not the same thing. Like Mark just said, a theory, and this is how it is defined, but a theory, you have to have a hypothesis first. You find something and you have a question and you study that question until you find an answer. And if you get enough of the right answers and you can prove that your hypothesis is correct, it becomes a theory. That theory has proof behind it. A hypothesis has.
It's a question. It's a question that can be tested through science.
There you go. That's the correct definition. So they are different, but people use them like they're not. I hear it like Mark said, and Brenda can attest to this. I do the same thing he's doing. I hear that on TV. I hear people say it all the time, and it drives me nuts.
Well, my theory is that Sasquatch is real, and it's like, no, that's a hypothesis.
Hey, Mike, I didn't see you. Hey, Diana, I didn't realize you got. Where are you headed to today? Says Mike's driving.
Speaking of Sasquatch,
Tina says, I thought that's what a theory was. No, theory
is a proven fact.
A theory is when you have a hypothesis that says, I believe honeybees make honey.
Make honey, and you tested it, and by God, they made honey, and you're like, okay, that's a theory.
I just popped in my head as a simple way to say that, but that's the difference in the two. But
a hypothesis would be like, I think that honeybees make honey, and I need to like design experiments to prove or disprove that. When you prove it, it's theory.
Yeah, and enough people agree with you. I mean,
you're going to have some
peer review and that sort of thing.
Yeah, when you've been peer reviewed and you go through that grand.
Some people like to say science is no different than other. Oh, how am I going to say this? I've walked right into my own trap.
What do you get to say? How do I keep sticking myself with my own hay fork or something like that?
Well, anyway, we'll move right along. I'm about to get in trouble there. I won't go there.
Just stop.
Anyway, there's a difference in the two, and people use theory wrong constantly, and it drives me nuts too. Brenda hasn't weighed in on that discussion, but she could tell you I just get so upset. So anyway, today we're going to talk about Dennis Stafford, and I spelled Bruce wrong. Where's my proofreader when I need her? Not Bryce Bradley, Bruce Bradley. I'll have to fix that for future use. And their hypothesis has to do with the Solutrean people who were kind of in the parts of France and did a lot of the cave art that they found over there over the years. Anyway, let's move that to the next page. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment of 7 words or more. Apparently that helps the algorithm somehow. I guess algorithmically. Let's try to figure out how we can say that like paradigms, but I can't. Or not yet anyway. So I've been trying to do this. Since we're talking about the peopling of America, the Americas, north, south, and central, the whole new world, as we used to say, or I guess we still do sometimes. But anyway, I was just going to put some things that happened on this date in the Americas. Most of them are in the United States, but still. 1765 was when the Stamp Act was enacted that started the whole revolution thing, more or less. And that one, most people think, oh, that's 1776 or 1775, but really the Stamp Act was 10 years prior to that. The tea taxes and some of those were closer up to when things really got started, but the Stamp Act got things fired up because anything that was made of paper, you had to pay that tax on. 1873, the Spanish National Assembly abolished slavery in Puerto Rico. So actually, they were 10 years behind us. 1894, Chuck, this is for you, buddy. I put this in here just for me and you and
Mike.
Mike, for as we talk hockey sometimes. 1894, the first Stanley Cup championship game was played in Montreal, and it was against what was then the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association, and they defeated the Ottawa Capitals. Now they're called the Ottawa Senators. I thought that was kind of interesting. 1930. Oh, and this was a good one. This is for all of us, probably, possibly. In 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed in the Cullen-Harrison Act to legalize, or re-legalize maybe, the manufacture and sale of beer containing 3.2% alcohol by volume and light wines. And I didn't get to the. I don't know what. I don't know what day they decided to add whiskey and all that stuff in there. But
our people were still cranking it out, like dripping it through a cold copper pipe.
Well, that was different.
And it wasn't 3.2%.
No, it wasn't light wine either.
It wasn't light wine, but the
1934 on March 22nd was the first Masters tournament at Augusta National Golf Club. That's that where that they go after them golf eggs.
Mark, they're hitting them golf eggs, and
we're hitting them golf eggs around. 1960.
I'm like George Carlin. You hit it once. If you find it, you win.
That's about right. And 1960,
you win.
1963, Alcatraz Federal Prison was closed down, and the Beatles released their debut album, Please Please Me. I'm not sure, same day, same date, same year. I don't know how that worked out, but it did. 1972, the U.S. Senate sends the Equal Rights Amendment out to the states for ratification, and it didn't happen. I can't remember now. I can't remember how many states they signed, but I know they needed 2 or 3 more to make it, and it never got there. 1988, the United States Congress voted to override President Ronald Reagan's veto of the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987. I didn't remember that one. I should have known that one. Where was I in 1987? I was in Nashville. Okay.
We were hunting deer at Catoosa or something.
That's possible. And so just a few births that happened on this day. Louis L'Amour was born today, Mark. I put that in there for us, mostly. I thought that was kind of cool. Actor Ross Martin was born, and I know Ross Martin from playing Artemis Gordon in the Wild Wild West. Yeah. He was the brains, the guy that invented all the cool gadgets. Ross Martin was actually more famous for being a Shakespearean actor on the stage. I don't know how many TV shows he ever did. Maybe this is the only one he did. Certainly the only series I've ever seen him in. But after watching him for years on
you need to plug up Tina's comment on golf. A beautiful walk run by a little white ball.
That's it. Anyway, after seeing him on Wild Wild West all those years, I never could imagine him as Shakespearean, but he was.
Diana said 3.2. That's not beer.
No, that's not beer. I know.
You talk to the people in eastern Oklahoma, they would agree with you. That is not beer. But that's what they still sell there.
Yeah. Do they sell both or just 3.2?
Nope, just 3.2.
When I was growing up, you probably wouldn't remember this because you probably weren't doing this at that time. But we could buy alcohol at 18, but we were kind of probably buying it before that. But in Virginia, just across the state line, they sold 3.2 to anybody from 18 to 21, and once you hit 21, you could buy 6.0 or whatever else they had back then. I learned that my grandfather was a bootlegger, and I lived in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma? Well, that was probably a good living in Oklahoma and during the Depression.
So we had a bootlegger that lived in London, Arkansas. You could only, if you went to, you had to drive. So our county was dry. Pope County was dry. You had to drive all the way to Conway, Arkansas. I don't know how far that was, 60 miles to get spirits or anything, but you could only buy like one bottle of whiskey and one, I don't know if you could get a case or a 6-pack of beer. That's all you're allowed to transport out of Conway back towards Pope County. Otherwise, you were technically bootlegging, but we had a bootlegger that everybody knew where he lived.
Right.
Yeah. And it was more pricey, but we could go like a half mile from the house instead of driving 60 miles.
No, Tina, that's not what I meant. I mean, they might have happened up there from time to time. No, I just, when you were 18 in Virginia at that time,
Apparently most of Brenda's grandpa's jobs were pretty shady.
Well, like I said, you'll have that.
You'll have that.
Considering where they grew up and what
you live in the Indian territories, you're probably gonna, that's where John Wayne went to hunt people from when he was True Grit.
Carol said, around here we go to Canada when we turn 19 because that was the drinking age there. Is that still the case? And Diana says it's 18 in Manitoba. And in some parts of the world it is 16, I think, and I think in the UK you can drink at 16. I think
probably drink in the UK when you're born.
Yeah, I mean, it seems.
I know in Ireland and Scotland they mix like whiskey with their Cheerios or whatever. When you got a head cold, you get like your bowl of porridge and you pour a little whiskey in it.
So what you're saying in Ireland, they put whiskey in their Lucky Charms?
That just don't sound good, but yeah.
Anyway, what I was saying was in Virginia, but that time when you turned 18, you could buy and drink 3.2 beer. When you hit 21 back then, you could whatever beer they had for sale, 6.0, 6.
You could go get regular beer.
You could go get regular beer. In Tennessee, we only had regular beer, and when you hit 18, you could buy that. We just, just 18 here. And I don't know what year they went. I can't remember what year everything went to age 21. It was in the I guess that was late. Well, I don't really remember when that was because it didn't affect me. Actually, the 18-year-old part didn't affect me too much because there was a couple beer joints that we could drive up to the back of the window anytime we wanted to and get a cold one. So it was.
Well, I know that during Vietnam, there were a lot of boys that, they were 18 or whatever, and you could go fight for your country, but not buy beer.
Yeah.
And that's horse
manure. Tina, I went to, in 1972, as a Boy Scout, I went to Philmont Scout Ranch. And on the trip out there to save money, we were on a bus, but to save money, we stopped and stayed at military bases, several different ones. But I'll never forget we pulled into. It might have been out on the south side of Texas. I'm not sure which one it was. Anyway, they put us up in barracks, and downstairs in the barracks they had like a common room with a TV and stuff in it, and they had some vending machines. And I'll never forget, there right there in front of all of us was a vending machine where you could drop in a couple of quarters and get you a cold beer. Not saying anybody did that, but I'm not saying anybody.
Yeah, right.
The Diana says you can go to war, but you can't have a drink. Isn't that kind of silly, Diana?
It's insane.
Carol said,
go die for your country, but not have a cold beer. That's insane.
I think it was her having a drink legally when she was 18, then they changed. I bet that time period there where they transitioned from 18 to 21, I bet that caused a lot of consternation. I bet a lot of people went in to get their cold beer just like they always had. And I bet they had to argue with people about their ID and how old they were and all that. As I got older, the drinking age followed me. I think it's my fault. When I turned 18, it was 18.
When I was 18, it was 18. And when I was 21, it was 21.
Let's just be glad it didn't follow you all the way for the rest of your life. That would have been bad. I remember my next oldest sister was really mad at the time. Yeah, I bet. When I went to college in Florida after high school, we had a pub in the student center where you could go in, sit down, have a cold beer, and probably a burger or something. But all that went away because I remember coming back to Knoxville to visit a couple of friends. This was years later. To visit some friends of mine who were going to UT, University of Tennessee, and they had closed up their student center.
And when you got home, it was closed too, probably.
Yeah. So you could die without even having a cold beer. Mike said, "Yeah, just you could, Mike. You could die, get shot, and never have had a cold beer, possibly." Which would have been
it would have been warm, but
well, yeah,
that's what Dad always talked about. It was all the beer they got was whatever the air temperature was. which is why he never liked beer. But
well, that's pretty good. I never was very keen on warm beer either.
But I have many photos of him and Mike's arrest, and they only got one R&R when they were there, and it was just in country R&R, and they went to China Beach.
Oh yes, China Beach,
and
which was a very real place.
All the photos are of Mike, and he's like obviously hammered.
Well, I could certainly see why that would drive you to drink. Hang on, I got a broke fingernail here. I got to fix real quick. Hooking it on everything I'll touch. So anyway,
he got caught by a water buffalo in a rice paddy, and Dad said a little 3-year-old kid came running over and grabbed that all those buffalo had big old rings in their noses.
Yeah.
And the little 3-year-old kid ran over and grabbed that buffalo and started yapping at it in Vietnamese, and they were like, and all the guys that were on that patrol were like just laying on their backs, kicking their feet in the air, laughing. Oh.
We had a bar owner here who told a friend's son home from overseas. He said he was only 20. He said, Bob said, if you can fight and die for this country, you can drink in my bar. Good for him.
And I know bartenders that have said similar things that like, you're welcome here anytime, boy or girl.
I don't think you ever knew him, but my buddy Kevin's father, Joe, was a neat gentleman. I really like Joe, and but he made his own wine in his house. I mean, he was the first guy I ever met that made wine, and he just all kinds of stuff. And they'd have a drink from time to time, but he used to keep a 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon underneath the seat of his work van. And if he got out somewhere and decided it was time to have a beer after work, or now he didn't. I'm not gonna say he wasn't the kind of guy to get drunk and drive or something. But if he got home or whatever, and it was working out in his garage or his shop outside, and his van would be parked there, he'd reach under the seat of that van, pull out a beer, a Pabst Blue Ribbon that had been sitting in the sun all day long at 120 plus degrees. He just thought that was great. That was the nastiest stuff I ever tasted in my life. And a lot because he could have lost his. Oh yeah, that's very true, Tina. I mean, I get that. That's a big deal. Okay, two last one. One, Uribe was the Dominican Bay. I tried to get some other things from other countries, the Americas. So one in 79, one. I can't even say this now.
Uribe
was born in the Dominican Republic, and he played baseball up here. I was looking. I thought he played for the Dodgers and he played for the Braves. I got to looking. I think he played for just about every baseball team in the country. He got bounced around a lot. He sort of fit the example of Suitcase. What was his name? Suitcase Robertson or whatever. Another guy that got bounced around a lot. And then J.J. Watt, who was I only put it. I just saw him. There were hundreds of other names that people I didn't know. J.J. Watt is a football player. I think, and the reason I put him in there is not because
he's a monster.
He is, but he's also a pretty neat guy. I mean,
he's a really cool guy that was a vicious monster on the field.
He's taken a lot of his money and worked with relief and gone to help people that were.
He's still doing that.
Yeah, I know. He's got a company that does that. That's what they do now, and I think that's cool. You go out and be that kind of guy like Mark's describing, a monster on the gridiron, and I mean he was a big old he'd
rip your head right off your neck.
Yeah, I won't tell you what he'd do in your neck once he got your head off. But anyway, but off the field, he just does all this really great work for people. I just think he's a neat guy.
Kay said PBR is a very popular beer right now. I can't even imagine that. But
for a while you couldn't buy it much around here. You didn't see it, and it sort of made a comeback.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving right along to today's show. So here, like I said, I'm going to kind of run through some of this, and we can back up and talk about it. But for a long time, the main hypothesis of how the Americas were populated was people migrated from Eastern Asia across the Bering Sea Strait Land Bridge and made it into what's now Alaska and worked their way down, all the way down eventually to the tip of South America.
In the ice-free corridor.
In the ice-free corridor. Yeah, now you know what? I didn't realize that was.
You couldn't live there.
No.
Nothing lived there when it happened.
Yeah.
You couldn't have made a living there. You would never have survived that journey. But anyway.
Most of the records say they think that bridge was about maybe 600 miles wide at some point. And that was 21,000 years ago or thereabouts. And you know, and I put in there a little bit about the habitat. It said it was, you know, what they described as shrub tundra, which is, you know, little bitty short bushes, willows, and maybe some birch trees that get about this tall. I mean, it's rough country, but that's been the
paradigm.
most accepted and popular hypothesis or whatever for quite some time now, until people started finding stuff in this country that didn't make sense. For example, these two gentlemen, Mr. Dennis, Professor Dennis Stanford, and Professor Bruce Bradley down there at the bottom. Now, who was actually, he's an American, but he's listed as an at least when he started doing this, he was from Exeter University in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah, he lost a coin flip, and he got to go to Europe.
Okay.
Although he was already interested in that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, Stanford was a Wyoming boy.
Was he?
He's from Rollins or somewhere there.
Well, Bradley was from. Is he from Missouri? Oh no, New Mexico or somewhere.
I think he's from the south. I think he's from Arizona, maybe.
Okay.
But anyway, they ended up working together. I think Bradley did his PhD work in Wyoming.
Yeah, I think he did. Which is why I thought it was weird when he ended up at Exeter,
but he ended up teaching and researching out of Exeter. But he was already he was already interested in. He had a mentor that kind of pushed him that direction. So I like to think he lost the coin toss and between him and Dennis, and like, well, you got to go to England.
but he doesn't. I mean, honestly, he doesn't look like your typical what you'd think of as a British professor. But
and he's not. He's
not. Yeah,
he's not. A master flint knapper, and
right. That's what I was going to say. He's a master flint knapper. He can make all these things that he talks about. So anyway, in 2004, these two guys got together because I'm sure they were talking about it for a long time before this. And they sort of came up with this, what some people call a Solutrean hypothesis. And it all started, I believe it was Stanford. It might have been Bradley, but I was thinking it was Stanford.
I think it's older than that. I think there was guys back in the 50s, 30s to 50s.
When did they find that first biface that was sticking out of the wall, so to speak?
I don't know, but there were already people talking about the similarities between these point types.
Gotcha.
And these guys took it and ran with it, and did lots of work with it.
So one of the examples, there's a really good documentary out. It's been out for a while, but it's making the rounds again. I saw it the other night on PBS here, and it's about it's about this whole idea of people migrating out of Western Europe into the Americas, and which is what this whole Solutrean hypothesis is about. And it all I'll show you a map here just in a second. It might help explain it better, but and these, like Mark says, these projectile points and stuff that kind of link them back were the same kinds that were coming out of Western Europe. But one of the things I read was somebody actually found a biface point sticking out of an eroding shoreline. Not really a cliff face, but a bank.
Yeah, Delmarva.
Yeah, and it's sticking out of the mud, 20 feet from the top of this bank, and it's sticking out, and you take it out, and it's this perfect biface point that people didn't think belonged here at that time, or at least not in the eastern United States. And there it was in the Chesapeake Bay area. So after that, they went on to work. And it kind of, I think even between these two guys, it sort of it fell into a lull for a bit until about 2014, and that's when they actually decided we better do something about this now, because this island where they found this is literally washing away.
Right.
Even on this documentary, they showed them working on this bank, and they're trying to dig down to this layer where they are hoping to find more evidence of occupation and or habitation, and part of it collapses on them. They have to, make some changes to their work site. And I was sitting there watching it, thinking that this is not good. That'd be a good place to get crushed and washed out to sea or whatever. Anyway, and it all has to do with the last great glacial period, or ice age, which is about 21,000 years ago, give or take, 3 or 4 on either side of that, and depending on where you're talking about. And two things happen. One is people don't realize that, or I did. If you don't think about it, I didn't know this for a long time. During the ice age period, a vast majority of the water on the planet Earth is locked up in these huge, thick glaciers all over the world, or northern part of the world. That some of these glaciers would be a couple miles thick at this point in time, and that's a lot of water. So the ocean, in effect, was smaller than it is now.
Yeah, 120 meters.
Yeah,
shallower,
which is going to move the shoreline out
way out.
And yeah, in some places it's going to be way out, miles out, depending on how shallow that how it drops off naturally, or it could drop off and it be a short distance. But this changes the whole contour of what North America would have looked like. So and this is some of the points they found that they have found over time, and some of these are duplicates. And that link should work if anybody wants to try it, to a podcast about some of this work. I think Mr. Bradley may be on it. Yeah, it is. And but there's a whole bunch of really good websites about this work and things they found, and stuff that they have found since then in Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee. I mean, which is going to lead us to the controversy here in a minute. So this is what basically it looked like during the last glacial maximum. Did I get the right? Yeah, that's right, Matt. And I kind of had to draw in that red line is my line. I just sort of put that in, and I also filled in some of the glacial ice on the North Atlantic there. That's that shiny silver part kind of in the middle. This area up in here. But when this is all frozen and the ice sheet comes all the way down to here, then it is not unreasonable to think these people couldn't have traveled along the edge of the ice below and the ice pack here, hunting seals and auks, which lived all along this area back then, and fishing, salmon, other fishes,
walrus, whatever,
walrus, seals, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Just like they did in Alaska, in fact, still do in many ways, in small boats. And some people, and that's another part of the controversy. Oh, they couldn't have done that in boats. Well, they do it in Alaska. I mean, they still do it in Alaska. They just got outboard motors on them now. But anyway, that distance across there shrunk from about 3,000 miles down to somewhere between, say, 1,500 miles to maybe 1,200 miles. And the distance across through there in a small boat might have been a couple of months, but a couple of months wasn't anything back then. I mean, hell, nobody even had a calendar. They didn't know how long that was. That's a joke. Anyway.
It ain't no different than how they peopled North America from the West.
Exactly. But nobody thought they went this way. So anyway, in this, there I've got the 125 meters, 410 feet roughly. That's how much lower the oceans were then as opposed to now, which, like I said, moved shoreline way out. It made a huge difference. Not to mention the fact that a lot of erosion hadn't happened yet. So anyway, and that happened. That ice age was roughly 19,000 to 26,000 years ago. Again, give or take a little bit. And I just threw this in there to kind of give you an idea how far down the ice came in the United States, what's now the United States. I mean, as far down as southern Ohio. Where you guys lived in southern Ohio was right on that southern edge of the, if I'm not mistaken, where the glacier.
Yeah, it's like 50 miles north.
Yeah. And everything above that's flat as a table.
It's flat as a dang pancake, and everything south of that looks like Tennessee.
Well, it's all pushed up into rolling hills. First place I ever went, you guys took me somewhere, Bucks Creek or someplace, and there was I don't know, like a small rock quarry, and they quarried pea gravel out of it, and then pea gravel was a remnant of glacial moraine that got pushed down, ground down, smoothed down. We didn't have that down here. We had to bust our rocks up and make gravel.
Right.
Anyway, so that's just an example of how far down the ice came. Now, this point on the right is, I believe, a copy of a casting of the one that they talked about finding in that bank originally that pulled out, and well, there it is. These other ones are other tools and points that they have picked up at that site over the years. I believe I'm speaking correctly. I think that's what I read. And it looks to me like there's an awl there and a couple of other things. We're going to talk about it in a minute, but the Solutrean people had something, their tool making technology was really good for their time. And
it was overly complex.
Yes. And
meaning that it had more significance than just making a tool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For example, and I didn't realize this, that's where the first example of a needle, a sewing needle with an eye in it that you could thread your sinew through to sew up clothing. I didn't, because I always, most of on the western part of the world, as they came down, they used an awl, punched a hole, pulled a thread through it, or pulled a sinew through it, or whatever they're sewing with, punched a hole, did it again. These guys actually had a sewing needle, which I thought was fascinating. And that sounds so simple, but that is such a huge leap in technology, because they can make better clothes, they can make warmer clothes, more weatherproof clothes for that trip around the ice. I just thought that was amazing. And I missed something. Somebody over here is laughing about me or something. Yes, I can do that link, Tina. Thank you. In fact, I may already have it. Let me see if I've already got it. Yeah. I believe this is it right here. It took a minute for that joke. Wait. Oh, the joke. Yeah, it was I needed a drum or a rim shot for that, and then let you think about it for a minute, Carol. Anyway, so then this is a picture from that Canadian or that documentary that's called, Across the Ice or something. It's all about this Eastern movement from over across. And one of the questions, some people that don't believe this hypothesis could be true, they say, well, where's the proof that they had boats? Well, the same argument's been made by archaeologists who live in Australia, because people that migrated to Australia came from above in the north, down the island chains of Western Asia or Eastern Asia, and came down, and they had boats. I mean, how did they get there if they didn't have boats? So to say that ancient people didn't have boats, they couldn't have built a boat, is probably pretty ridiculous. And for one thing, these boats wouldn't have lasted. I mean, over time, they would have pretty much disintegrated.
They would have been a wood frame with a hide stretched over.
Yeah, that's all it would have been. And the other thing, you got to go back again to this, how much further out the shoreline was. And that's a key point. I'll bring that up again just in a minute. But the water was lower, and I mean, things were just different. And this is an example of some of the cave areas in the part of France where the Solutrean people or culture wasn't really a people. It was a how you explained that to me the other day. It's not there wasn't like a Solutrean tribe of people. It was a more of a
Technological culture.
technological time period or whatever. And these are some of the paintings that are on the walls in these caves right here. I believe, um, they were cave people, but there weren't any dinosaurs. Thought I'd throw that in there. And this is just an idea where they found sites that were part of the Solutrean culture 15 to 20,000 years ago, for example. Some of the caves and things in France and Spain and that part of, what's that, the Iberian Peninsula. And then those people, and that ice sheet came down nearly to there and they went around the top. Just like the Vikings did later, just the Vikings had bigger boats. Now, I'll put this map in here because it gives an idea of that ice sheet and how far down it came as compared to today. But the reason I put this in here was one of the key components to the hypothesis that these people certainly could have done this was that this was the historical range of the great auk. Basically, you had great auks that lived all around there. Auks,
which is a big old bird.
Which was a big old penguin-looking bird. They weren't penguins, but they were a big old bird, and they had a lot of things that they needed, like down for warmth. They had large breast muscles, which were fatty and had a lot of oil in it, apparently, probably because they ate a lot of fish. So they had a lot of things that early peoples that were trying to go around this ice sheet would have needed. So you mix that, you got ox to eat, you got fish, you got seals and walruses, and looks like I had one more earlier. So there was certainly an abundance of food all around this thing. If you could survive the winter and the weather, which you were already acclimated to, you could make it to the new world without going hungry. Probably ate better than the Donner Party did, for example.
That was in poor taste. Ta-da-da.
In poor taste. that joke needs a little salt and pepper.
You need like some long pork.
Yeah, some long pig. So this is, I think some of the folks that have written about this actually make a pretty big deal about the ox because evidently ox were extremely, I don't want to say dense, may not be the right word.
They were a dime a dozen.
But there were a lot of huge flocks, and they were easy to hunt. And they had eggs that were about this big, and the birds themselves were larger than they actually look here. And interesting. I got a picture here. It may be the next picture. They just laid their eggs on a rock, just like the one that bird's standing on, literally. And I guess they just held it there. I mean, just literally on a rock. They didn't even build a nest. At least not anything we'd think of as a nest today. And this was the last known, see what I mean by a rock? This was the last known breeding site of the great auk that they know for sure. There could have been some scattered around that part of the world because there were rumors. They think they went extinct in the mid 1800s, mostly because of the down trade. Apparently, they had great down for pillows and blanket comforters and that sort of thing. So they were hunting for that. Some of the first game hunting laws actually were enacted in the Great Britain part of the world, and I think as early as the late 1500s. and it was to mainly slow down the killing
the
off
ox
the
trade.
the what?
Slow down the ox trade.
Yeah, and the funny thing, it said they
Didn't work.
passed new laws to keep them from being hunted for their feathers, but they didn't pass any laws that kept them from being caught, cut up, and used for fish bait. Go figure. Anyway, that big rock, and somehow or another, that rock reminds me of something from Star Wars. Like we're doesn't it? I mean,
It looks like that vehicle they used on Tatooine or whatever. That
oh yeah, it does.
them Jawas were coming out of.
It does kind of look like that. So anyway, as I said, moving right along.
Wasn't that what they were, Jawas?
Yeah,
The little black guys with the red eyes.
red eyes, and then speak words. So this is how they might very well have traveled, and these are examples of canoes and things or kayaks. I don't know if you'd call that top one a canoe. There may be a better term for that, but that was something big. A whole family group could move in that with all their materials. They could flip this thing over and use it as shelter from the wind and lay their walrus skins out there, much like a buffalo hide, and and actually stay warm. I never thought about that. A big walrus would probably be pretty close to the same size as a buffalo hide,
or bigger,
and then probably at least as warm, if not warmer, just because of how it's made and the different kind of hair. So this is how you kill a seal, stretch the hide out there, scrape the hide, tan it, whatever they did to them there. I don't know what their leather technology was. Or this bottom boat is basically just rawhide, like Mark uses in his saddle work. I thought this was cool because this is not that old. There are no remaining boats of that age in this part of the world, but these boats that were used by the Alaskan Eskimos right up until the last century or so were still made like this.
And look, he's got a sled on there.
Yeah, he's got his sled on the front, and he's got some kind of basket on the back so he can paddle around and do both, get on the ice or paddle in the water, whichever he needs to do, or she, probably he, but she. And that little bitty kayak, I mean, that thing, I don't even know how they get in something like that. Look how close to the water that is, and where's his legs going in that?
And he's hunting seals.
And he's hunting seals. If you look, I just noticed it real close. He's got an addle in his hand too.
Yeah.
Which was another important thing about these guys crossing over. They had that technology. They don't. And I read a little bit more about this. I never thought about it. But living in this kind of conditions, bows and arrows really weren't very handy.
They weren't really used yet.
No, they weren't used. So a spear and an addle was the thing to use. It was called a sand crawler, Kay said. Kay said, I had a down pillow once and hated it, so I wouldn't be buying another one. Well, they were soft and they were warm, but they were probably too soft for me. I grew up sleeping on my mom told me, and I believe her, that I grew up sleeping on a chicken feather pillow that they probably made at the house, and where she grew up in the Sensabaugh Holler. And
remember when we were talking about sleeping in the teepee last episode, and you and I had enlisted guy mummy bags.
Right.
And they were full of chicken feathers.
Well,
that poked out through the quills poked out through the fabric of the bag and would poke you. And Dad was sleeping in like a silk officer's bag with actual down in it.
Exactly. Tina, that's true. You used what you had, and those pillows that I had were much harder, firmer. Almost would call them hard as compared to what most, especially today, they pillows seem really soft to me, and they were heavy, and I guess that was also partly because they'd been slept on for 55 years or whatever at the time. But their mom used to say, "Oh, that's a chicken feather pillow." She said, that's you need to get you a good one." I said, "Well, I happen to like this one, so I'm going to keep it." And I slept on that for a long, long time. Brenda, if she's in here paying attention, she could attest to that. We had those at my house, where I slept on for years. Another example of the boat, and you can see how wide it is. The bottom is relatively flat. I mean, this is like a Hudson Bay canoe of later days, where you hauled, trade supplies and all that kind of stuff across the Great Lakes, but they were traveling across the North Atlantic. And that's all I have for slides. So what I wanted to do now was close this out, and we can just talk about it a little bit more, because there's a lot buried that I didn't get to here, and why this is so controversial. But there is a group of people who are really working, and there's more than I had time to research, that believe in this hypothesis that people certainly could have come west as just as well as they came east. And then there's another group of people said, "Oh no, they only came from the west." Oh, there's no proof they came from the east. But there is proof, I think, because they found these points, these projectile points that, came most likely from Europe, or at least were, they learned how to make them there first. And now we're finding them all down the East Coast, literally. I didn't realize they were all the way down into Florida already, but that's just the same on the West Coast as traveling down to the southern part of the United States, southwestern United States, or all the way down the coastline to Tierra del Fuego or whatever in South America. So I don't know why they couldn't be, but I heard a lady argue this point on this video, the documentary that I watched, or one of them, and they find the points, which are flint stone, but if they didn't find, say, a boat, then that must not be a true hypothesis. That you can't prove it. And my argument to that is, well, damn it, somebody made that projectile point. Who do you think did that? They didn't just pop out of the ground.
Yeah, and so the paradigm forever, the main hypothesis of the peopling of America. Originally, it was Clovis was first. That Clovis people were here first, 13,000 years ago, maybe 15 now. And that they came across from Beringia and went down through that ice-free corridor, which didn't open up till a little bit later. And when it would have opened up, it would have been a dead zone, basically.
Pretty much.
That there wouldn't have been animals there. You wouldn't have been able to walk from Alaska to Montana without starving to death. It would have been tricky. So then they decided now that people definitely probably came around from Asia following the ice sheets, just like we're talking about here, from the west, and came down, following the kelp beds and all that rich sea country, where you had lots and lots and lots of food, all the way down to California and later to all the way to southern South America. And I don't doubt that happened at all. I think that's I think that's beyond question. Actually, I think that definitely happened. And then at the same time, I'm not opposed to believing that folks came from the east as well, and that they just intermingled, mixed in, and there you have it.
Well, and think about this too.
And they get so entrenched in their view that it's like, no, that couldn't happen. And,
now, not that people are like that today, obviously.
And it's like, these weren't modern Europeans. These were people that they were the same folks that went, like this across Eurasia. They were the same folks. And anyway,
Tina, you're welcome to, if you have a thought or want, you're welcome. I mean, this is a free thought zone, pretty much. You got an opinion or your own hypothesis, throw it out there. Doesn't mean we'll agree or disagree, but you can still use it.
But I mean, the methodology of building these points, that they pretty much figured Clovis was invented here. That particular type of point was invented in the Americas. And I don't disagree that particular style was invented here, but the technology that is used to build Solutrean points versus Clovis points is very, very similar. And they're the only two kinds of points on the planet that were built like that. So,
and even the Clovis thing has changed over time now, because they found the first Clovis points that were I guess
they were supposed to be first, but
they were in Clovis, New Mexico. Literally, that's where they were found. But now they've found them east all the way, and now some of the greatest deposits, probably
Portales.
Huh?
The actual site is in Portales, Portales.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the closest bar was in Clovis. And that's
anyway, you know what I mean.
Literally, that point was named after the town that had the closest bar.
Right. So out there, but now, like I said, they're all over. They found them all over Tennessee, and all the way even down into Florida now along that.
And all the way to New Jersey and all that. I mean, they're way more common in Kentucky and the Northeast and Tennessee, etc. Way more common than they are in the West. So the cluster of the highest density is in the East, not in the West.
Yeah, so one might posit the hypothesis that they actually went from east to west instead of west to east, which was originally kind of.
Well, and that's what Bradley talks about, is that they were exploring out and like, okay, let's go chase mammoths out here in the Great Plains or whatever. And that they actually got up into Saskatchewan from the east.
I'd say they did, Carol. I'd say they did. Might not have been much better, but I bet it was more than 3-2. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been out there digging.
There was probably some wormy tequila involved too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there was.
They were a bunch of professors, archaeological. They were a bunch of professional archaeologists and professors that, like, where can we go find a beer?
And then listen,
And it's not that far away from the.
actually, that discovery was made by the black cowboy. I can't think of his name. And
No.
no,
Get your no.
I'm getting my points mixed up
You're
again.
getting your points mixed up.
That's
That was Folsom.
That was
The kid that found the Clovis points was a kid named White Man. And he was like read the National Geographic, and he was always out there exploring around and punching cows or whatever. He was also probably a cowboy. But he was just a kid that found that site where they found the mammoths and the first Clovis points.
I keep getting that backwards, so my apologies. I've had that
George McJunkin found the Folsom points.
Folsom points. It's confusing a little bit, but and the cool thing about this technology, and you got to remember that if you had a guy who could sit down and nap out a perfect biface, for example, it was thin, it was sharp. You could do so much with it. That guy might sit there and flake out a bunch, a handful of those a day or a week, and then they had some to trade, so they would get passed around. The guy from the next valley might come over and want some projectile points for his atlatl darts, and he might have some popstone to trade, or he might have he might have good beaver pelts or muskrat. Because back then muskrat was still good.
Because and that's a good point, that they don't think that Clovis was a people.
No, it was how'd you describe it?
It was a technology that was passed around. Just like the Western stem tradition, there's another tradition that was on the West Coast, or all the way into the Great Basin country, that were of that same period, they likely weren't the same people either.
Right. I'm gonna put some links in while we're talking here. For example, here's one from Tennessee. I didn't realize there was as much work going on with this in the Tennessee Valley as there is. There's quite a bit. And this place in South Carolina, Kay, this is for you.
The
Topper site.
Which they have dated human beings back to 50,000 years now.
Which is way much further than they thought people were ever here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had another one here from.
There's the Metacroft site up in Pennsylvania, in western Pennsylvania, that is 20 plus, probably 1,000 years old. There's the Monte Verde site in southern Chile that's 20 plus years old, 20,000 plus years old. So Clovis was not. They might have been the same exact folks, but with some additions, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, and some of it we won't know. Geese out of there within. Off target. Oh, here it is. Reminded me of the show we saw as a kid. There was an Eskimo boy that wanted a rifle to hunt with because he didn't like hunting with a bow. The thing was, he was shooting geese out of the air with a bow. Well, we've seen that done. I've never done it, but we've seen it done. Mark may have hit birds in the air. We certainly shot at aerial targets, and we talked about that recently too. But
pheasants.
So they could do that stuff. I don't know if I remember seeing that. I don't know if I saw that show or not, but it rings a bell somehow. these other sites I'm passing along, just if you're curious about any of this at all, and I don't know if Mark and I make people curious if we turn people off from it, but whichever it is, it's out there if you want to read about it. And some of it is science stuff and it's boring. These papers, but there's that with since the bad invention of the internet, there's lots of stuff. There's a lot of shows. There's a lot of internet sites where they actually get these guys on there and they talk about it and they show a lot of. I mean, they're interesting. Well, they're interesting to me, and I think a lot of them are done so they're interesting to other people. I'm not an archaeologist, but I am interested in what they do. I've worked around a few archaeologists. Can be, like Mark said earlier, they're kind of stubborn. They don't like to change their opinion about things as they find new stuff. But at the same time, they really find some cool stuff. I used to have to haul a few around once in a while. My job to let them, check sites. And I'll be honest, sometimes they made me madder than hell because I couldn't get something done. And they wanted to go out and dig test sites on a site that I knew a bulldozer had just been across last year. That kind of stuff. And it used to just drive me crazy. But that was their job. Maybe not last year, but in some areas.
We used to take, I've probably told this a million times on this show, we used to take great pleasure in aggravating our local BLM archaeologist. I would make points at home and my buddy would drop them on the ground like, hey, can I keep this?
Which I'm sure.
And she would always say, no, that's like you're not allowed to take artifacts from the BLM lands and blah, 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 blah. And that's from this period and it's 5,000 years old or whatever. And my buddy would always I watched him make that point in his yard last weekend,
Yeah. I bet that did not make them happy.
She would get so mad at us, and it got to where it's we cried wolf too many times, and she just wouldn't believe us at all.
Probably lucky they didn't.
We might have actually found something real at some point, and no, you made that last week. And
yeah, we know you make that.
No, I didn't.
Honest, really, this is real.
I swear to God, this is a real one.
I was looking for. I don't think I put this on. If anybody's interested in learning more about ox, which obviously they've been gone for a while, but. Is it which society or group had the journal called the Auk? Was that the
American Ornithological?
Was it the Ornithological? Okay,
I think
I couldn't remember if it was them or if it was somebody else, but
it was our version of the penguin. I mean, they were the northern hemisphere version of the penguin. Served the same purpose.
Well, okay, that very well could have been. You know what? It could have been a Disney thing.
Which one? The one with the Eskimo boy?
Yeah, the Eskimo boy.
I'll guarantee it was went back when they used to do those cool programs like that.
Because they would have. I mean, they showed people hunting and things like that.
Back when Walt himself was still alive, they did cool. They did really cool shows.
So yeah, that's quite possible. That may be why it rings a bell with me too. Anyway, there's some links. You guys can, if you're interested, I would encourage you to go check them out because, and like I say, you may be surprised to find that. There may be a site near you that you've never heard about. And, oh, shoot, that's wrong. Well, I was trying to see. I had some other stuff here I was going to look at real quick, pull up, see if I wanted to put it in here. Here's a little bit of an explanation about the ocean levels too. I'll throw that in there. Where did I go there? I keep moving my page.
Well, a lot of this who got here first, who was here, the longest, etc., has been based on some genetics. And unfortunately, the sample size is tiny. In the case of Clovis, it's one. And like, yep, see, couldn't have been those folks that came over.
Right. Because that's the thing about science. To prove a hypothesis, you can't just do it with one thing. You got to have repeatability, or you got to be able to find more than one piece of pottery in a village to prove that they made a jar a certain way, or somebody in this village figured out how to put a ball jar with a screw top lid on it. You can't just do that with one jar. You got to find several. One gets people excited, but it won't prove the theory.
And when Bradley and Stanford came out with that hypothesis that folks might have come from the Solutrean culture over, they were just eviscerated by their peers. And you listen to Dr. Bradley, he's like, we didn't really have a dog in the hunt. We were testing a hypothesis, and we didn't say this definitely happened. We were trying to prove whether it did or it didn't. But they just it's like they eat their own. It's
they eat their young.
It just, to me, I don't think that does anybody any good. But
I think it stymies.
I think it stymies thought.
Yeah, or it
personally.
And sometimes it drives people to do things the wrong way, and sometimes it drives them to get out there and actually, prove their point. But, it doesn't do anything any good.
I don't think it does science any good.
And you get that infighting in other fields of science or study, but it seems like that's one of the worst. I mean, there's a whole battle line drawn out there in the sand that refuses to consider European settlement on this continent prior to Columbus for some reason. I mean, they've stuck their flag on that point of land, and they're sticking with it. And I think there's way more evidence out there now to prove that that's probably not that's not how it worked. But there's a lot of people that still want to kind of stick with that timeline.
Well, and again, like I said earlier, the people that would have come over during the time period we're talking about were not modern Europeans. They were the same people that were peopling the world,
People hadn't really.
It wasn't like it was like, Fred from Ireland that came over with red hair and white skin and
green eyes.
They just weren't those people yet.
No, they hadn't settled. They were still nomadic. They were extremely primitive. We talk about these being able to make these stone tools as technology, but it's certainly not technology like a water wheel or even a wheel for that matter. Or being able to fly. It's different, but it was a big step for their period of time, their point in history.
Huge.
But, they hadn't lived in like Mark says, they hadn't lived in northern France for 300 years or 1,000 years or in Rome or wherever yet. That hadn't happened. They weren't that settled. Some people think I didn't learn it in school. It isn't right. Well, that's true, Kay. And unfortunately,
Most people don't learn in school.
do what?
Unfortunately, most people don't learn in school.
That's true for two reasons. One is they don't. Two is we don't teach it. You know, a lot of this stuff isn't in. I mean, there's so much of history that gets left out because they didn't like the way it happened, or they don't want to admit that happened that way, so they just leave it out of the textbooks. And a whole generations of people grow up and they don't even think that's a thing, or they don't think that's how it worked. Tina said, because that's when we could write about it and read about it. Before we were literate, they can't see it and interpret it perfectly like once writing and reading was invented. Yes, I think I agree with that. I think I'm reading that correctly. And that's a good point. That had a lot to do with a lot of this stuff too, Tina. I mean, until humans were able to start recording their history and writing about some of this stuff, you know, it all we're down to whether or not we can find charcoal under 10 feet of soil and a biface projectile or a tool to try to interpret what was going on. Because there aren't any books. They didn't write it down. Or the closest thing in France, you know, we get wall art or paintings on the rocks. And, you know, that's the only way that. But thank goodness they did do some of that. Otherwise, we might not have any of it.
So I mean, and the battle that goes on between was Clovis here first, and whether there were earlier cultures here before them still goes on, and they still argue about it. It's like they've found points that are meters below the Clovis layer. And it's almost always like, oh, well, that just percolated down through the soil through a crack or something. And it's at some point, it's like, okay, we're busting your paradigm here.
Well, I was just watching
like the cult site. They found points way below the Clovis layer, and the Clovis layer is pristine. And these points are found a meter or more below the Clovis layer, and they're like, well, it just wiggled its way down through the Clovis layer, and that's where it happened to stop. And it's like, that's crazy.
Yeah, but that's one of the arguments. I mean, that's what you hear. And I was just watching that on one of these dig sites, one of these famous dig sites where they were showing the layers. They had it. I don't know if they had done this. Probably had done this intentionally as an interpretive site, but they showed the different layers where they were taking stuff out. You know, Clovis layer or whatever, and down. Right. And you know, down there was one of these sites. I don't know if it was the Savannah River site, Topper site. Might have been the Topper site. There was stuff that they think was about 50,000 years.
It cleared out, like they found that big blade core down at 50,000 years old.
Yeah, which is way below where they thought things sort of stopped, if you will. That's which is a silly.
And immediately people attacked them like, no, there's no way, you know.
Carol, I don't know. Wait, this got said a lot when I was in college. People tried to teach this, and they still do. But I don't think we do this well, especially not in lower grades or lower school. And that's critical thinking. That people don't we don't teach that early enough, I don't think, for people to actually start taking these ideas and looking at them in a critical sense and trying to figure them out. We just read stuff by rote or whatever and teach it that way. Unfortunately, not knocking teachers. I think teachers are, especially initially, some of the greatest people in our culture because they are teachers. I used to get mad. We used to have in aviation. They used to talk about people who taught classes on how to be a good mechanic, as you know, those who can do and those who can't get a job here to teach it. And I think that's BS because you need the best teaching it. Because if you don't have the best teaching it, the end product is going to be crap, and it tends to get worse as it goes further away from the source. So we don't do a good job of teaching that kind of stuff, I don't think, in school. Critical thinking took the same train as common sense. Well, yeah, it could be, Tina. Both got on that train and said, we're out of here. Maybe some prehistoric dog dug a hole and buried it. Yeah, maybe they did, Tina. That'd be an excuse. Maybe their dog buried that point way down below these others. You know, and that's something else that it's hard to get your head wrapped around sometimes, is when they've got this stair step of archaeological levels that they're clearing and digging, you know, millimeters at a time, scraping the top off, little layers, literally shaving the dirt off so they can make sure they don't miss anything. It's hard to think about that when you've got a meter of soil between, say, two different sites. There's a campfire up here with bones around it, and down here you got a site that's got projectile points and that kind of stuff. You got the distance there in real time, geological time. It's not like next month or next year or even not even the next century. It may be thousands of years in that time span. That's not it takes a long time for that dirt to build up like that. And they hate when you say dirt, but you know, it's kind of like going to, this has always fascinated me too. Go to the old world, go to Rome, and you look where they've excavated parts of Rome. And you know, there's 30 meters down, there's a whole nother level of this. I'm just pulling that distance out of my head. That's not real, but I mean, you know, there's a whole nother level of the city that even in the 2,000 years since it was created or whatever has been buried and reused on top of it. I mean, we just continue to go up. Generally speaking, we don't build down, but and that's not that's I don't think that clicks. I don't know if that clicks for anybody until they really start thinking about it. That takes a while. It doesn't happen just overnight. When it came to the Microsoft and other certifications, there's a way which is right. Most of the time, there are several other ways that work and are better. There's a lot of truth in that too. I guarantee you, if you go into any office building in this country or university and you go into a room of students, there's probably 10 students and there's at least 8 or 9 different ways they're doing the same things. Some work more efficiently, some don't. "2,000 years is only 20 feet under our feet." Yeah, and I think that's hard for people to wrap their head around. I really do. I mean, it certainly blew me away when I first kind of realized it. Carol has a point. It's about teaching critical thinking and supporting your argument through low stakes things in the early grades. So I think that blank because of that. Yes, I think I agree with you, Carol. I believe I'm reading that correctly. And that's a good point. I mean, now again, I don't want to go there. I started to say something else, and I'm not going to. Brenda has come back. Critical thinking and open mindedness will lead you to amazing places. It makes you free. I think that's very true. And then you teach the students to ask, what is your evidence for that? Yeah, we don't do that. I don't think we do anywhere near enough of that kind of thinking, teaching and thinking, Carol. I don't remember ever being really taught that in school. I think if in my case, and this is not being braggadocious or anything else, but in my case, I was curious about that, but I went out on my own usually to find those kind of answers. And by that, trying to learn how to, think that way. And I'm not saying I got it right. I still struggle with it sometimes. Well, it's almost too late. I'm going down the other way now, but yeah, it's just,
And that's hypothesis testing.
and that's hypothesis.
What's your evidence? Test it.
Brenda says she is fascinated by archaeology. Well, maybe that's what you should have done, babe. Instead of being a vet, you could have gone into archaeology because I don't think you're allergic to dirt. She was going to be a vet, but she was so allergic to horses and stuff, she just decided that was too much. So, if I say that the big bad wolf was meaner than the troll under the bridge, I need evidence from the pictures and/or the words. Yeah, something like that. I think that's a good point. And just the fact that you're teaching about the big bad
dead troll.
Do what?
Or a dead troll with wolf bites.
There you go. Carol Kay said,
you better have more than one or it don't count.
That's right. Takes more than one. Just because one troll got ate by the wolf doesn't mean it was a regular thing. A teacher that asked why you thought that way, because that is what the book said was not the right answer. I think that's a very good way to. I mean, that's a good science teacher who does that. I mean, to try to get people to think, and a lot of them do. Some don't. Some just teach it and go on. And honestly, we put a lot of pressure on people to do that. It's time schedules and hurry up and do this now. I think we put so much pressure on kids to learn fast and get it right now so they can, be ready for college at 18 and get a job and, go out and make your mark on the world, that they don't have time to get there. I mean, you got Mark. I think Mark could tell you that one of the reasons I'm saying this, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons your fascination led you to getting out and discovering and learning things on your own, but you had to have the time to do that. That didn't happen just in 1 year at school.
Right.
It took time, and you have to have that. And we don't allow much of that anymore for people, students especially. I don't think.
Yeah.
When I went back to college, I was in my.
Everything needs to be right now.
Yeah. When I went back to college, I was in my mid and late 30s, and I was sitting in classes early on, at least, with 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds who were not ready to go to college. I mean, they weren't mature enough, or they hadn't even decided that they were willing to learn anymore. They thought they were done. And it was so obvious that even the difference between 18 and say 22 sometimes made a huge difference in how much they worked, how much effort they put into it, how they thought about it, whether it was really important to them or not. And it was a lot of times it was that whole thing of you're 18, you get out of high school, you need to be done by the time you're 21 or 22 and have a job. And you better be the best one that's in the family so we can brag about you. And you can bring home lots of money and be a doctor and, that kind of stuff. It's hard. And I think it really slows down the thinking process. I think it's Tommy's thing. My opinion, nobody has to agree with any of that.
Well, and I didn't start till I was 22.
What, in college?
In college. I might have been 23. And I
forgot about that. I guess that's true.
I think I was 23. And all the people I hung out with were like all these old vets.
Yeah.
And that's, and everybody around us, we were like, what the heck are you even doing here? You don't put any effort into it. You're not serious about it. Why are you here?
Very good point.
And there was like, there might have been a dozen of us that were like hanging together, and we were all there to learn something.
Oh,
Intentionally.
I just got a text something about happy hour. Anyway, sorry. When I went to airplane school originally, I was 18. And now I was pretty enthused and excited about learning about airplanes. So I was driven in that regard. And a lot of people, I guess, were if you pick that kind of a profession. Most of them weren't there because they didn't get kicked out of class or couldn't do something else. But I'm like you, when I went to school, probably half the guys I was at school with were in their mid-20s or after, and they were veterans. They were Vietnam vets, most of them.
Yeah.
And they were there on the GI Bill, and they were either wanting to learn how to work on them and get certified, because maybe they did that in the Army or the Air Force or the Marines. And they had their certifications for military, but they needed to get a civilian ratings. So they were using their GI Bill to do that, or they were pilots or helicopter guys. But most of them were vets, and so it was a different. Not all the guys I went to school with early on were in that 18-year-old age range. I mean, you get when you go, you're 18 years old and you get sent off to Florida, Daytona Beach, or you go to Daytona Beach, Florida to go to school. I would be willing to bet that at least half the people I went to school with were more interested in the beach and hanging out with the bikini clad babes on the beach than they were sitting in class learning about hydraulic systems. At least that'd be my guess and my recollection. So much I learned in school as far as the facts have been proven right. Well, there's a lot of that too, Kay. You're right. But some of that's just because we're moving on and our knowledge base is growing. It's just a matter of whether we're teaching it or not. Again, that throws up a red flag for me that I'm really concerned about in this state, because they're pushing the voucher system down here, and I think they're taking money out of public schools. But the thing about the private school sector here is very it's religious based. And there's a lot of things about science they don't teach at all. And I've gone to school with some of those kids. When I went back to school, I went to school with kids that came out of that system, and they really struggle with science and things like that.
Dude, I'm going to leave.
You got to go? All righty.
We're going to Rock Springs, so I got to go get ready for that. So I'm going to leave out.
Don't get blown away or anything.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Good to see everybody.
So anyway, guys, there we go. And I might change the subject here just for a moment. I go back to the again, I get these things every day. This young lady that I was talking about that's in Appalachia that does the language skills. It's every day she's got a different word or a different thing, and some of them are serious, but most of them are fun. And she talks a lot like I did growing up, I think, or we do, still do. So anyhow, I don't have to go right this minute, but I can. I think vouchers are good for school competition, but I don't think the religious school should be included since it's town. Well, I agree with that, Tina. And that's unfortunately in this state, almost all private sector schools are religious based. I mean, I couldn't point to probably three just secular private schools in this part of East Tennessee. There probably are more, maybe. I don't know. But I could go down the road and within 10 miles, I bet I could point to 5 or 6 private religious based schools. And I don't think tax dollars ought to be going to them. I don't know about the competition part. Maybe you're right. We'll see, I guess. I do worry about the public system being shorted even more. But the religious side of that, I just, you know, it's funny that if you're religious based, you really don't pay taxes like everybody else. But now you can get tax dollars because, I mean, this state just passed the laws that say that they can do a lot of that. And I do worry about it. I mean, I don't care if you go to a Baptist school or a Methodist school or a Catholic school. What I worry about is what they teach, and they don't teach science. They don't. There are certain things that, since they aren't in the Bible, they don't teach. And I shouldn't be going here, and I apologize. I always swear. I tell Brenda I'm not going to do that, but it's so hard for me not to. But that really bothers me. I'm not sure what you mean about religious versus private. May not be that way up there, Tina. You may very well be right. But if you're not in a pretty good sized city, town here, you're not going to see a lot of other. But even like Knoxville, even in Knoxville, where you've got, I would go on a limb and say better public schools than maybe normal, and you've got some other private schools that you could go to. There are still more religious schools in that town than anything else, and they're everywhere. Every church around here seems to be adding on so that they can create a new school within that group. And I went to school. I went this far. I might as well go one more step. Hell, when I went back to school, I sat in science classes, zoology classes, and botany classes where I was with students who were 18 years old. I was 36, 35, 36, 37. They were 18, 19. And they literally would argue with the professor because their teacher at First Baptist School down here at the corner where they grew up didn't teach anything about science in that regard, particularly when you get to evolution and that sort of thing. And they just weren't going to. They didn't believe they weren't going to learn it. I saw one kid stand up and just say that's not right, and I'm not going to go there. And of course, he probably failed the class. I don't know. I didn't keep up with his grades, but it's um, that they just it just wasn't being taught, and they weren't ready to change yet. They weren't ready to think through it, I guess. I know one thing, schools have gotten a lot worse in this country. Public schools don't teach science either. Now, but at least they do offer it. They do at least agree that there is science. Um, nor math and STEM test results are miserable. I think I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I don't know. I don't think dumping all the money into the First Baptist School down here on the corner, and I'm just picking on them right now as the answer. Danny says, and this what usually isn't a topic for a Saturday morning show. This would be a good topic for a Thursday night show, maybe. Danny says that private schools shouldn't get money because they don't have to accept everyone the way public schools do. Parentheses, behavior problems, etc. That's true. And I agree with that too. I think there is so much wrong with that idea. I don't know. I could. It really bothers me, and I get really worked up about it sometimes. But yeah, I think I do believe this. I think it depends on where you're at and what schools and a lot of things. I think there are places where they teach science and do that kind of stuff better than others. And I agree that there's places where it's rotten, but I don't think it's rotten everywhere. And see down. Okay, hell, I've stepped off I might as well go all the way in the Rubicon here. Down here, they tend to blame everything on taking prayer out of the schools. I mean, if you talk to people that want around here and say, what's wrong with this public school system? One of the first things you're going to hear is they took prayer out of the schools. Ever since they took prayer out of schools, they've just gone to hell. And I don't agree with that. For one, they didn't take prayer out of schools. They just took it out as an organized event. You can still pray in school. Teachers can still pray in school. Students can still pray in school. It's just not an organized part of the school curriculum. And I don't think it should be. Down at the First Christian School, yeah, I guess it is. But how did I dive off on that? I swore I wasn't going to do that. But they blame that. The mindset here is that that's what went wrong with all the schools, and that's just not even the beginning. That's it's just I don't know. That's another. Let me see. I'm backing up here. Another good reason, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't anyway because tax dollar churches don't pay taxes. Yeah, my point exactly. One of my points exactly, Tina. Brendan and I were just having that discussion. They're making decisions and teaching kids and using tax dollars now from the state, my tax dollars, to send a kid to school, let him go to the First Baptist school down here. And I'm sorry if I'm picking on somebody in particular. I don't mean to be. That's just what's popping up in my head because they're pretty common. And they're able to teach kids whatever they want to or not and use my money to do it. I'd much rather my money went to the public school and we worked on making them better. That's my opinion. Tina says, as long they can't take prayer out of school as long as tests are given. Well, there you go, Tina. Good point. Math is also a touchy subject. I think we're learning Common Core math isn't working. I think we are learning is working. People can't count. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I've watched that happen personally. That's I don't. Where do you go back to teach that? I mean, where do we miss out on that? And Diana says it's the same. She's agreeing with Casey. That's the same in Canada. Tina's also talking. Yeah, and where did that go? Where did we get so many? Hey, Blue Nose, welcome in, Chris. You're on the tail end of today's topic. It's actually kind of run off the ramp here at the exit. Then we're talking about some other things, but I think I'd rather go back to the other stuff. I'm not uncomfortable talking about that. I just kind of, that's the kind of things I wanted to do on my Thursday night show, and maybe I'm going to go back and start doing that soon. But I think I'm probably motivated right now enough to do that. I think all of you are making some really good points about some of the same issues, but again, when you don't teach people those concepts when they're young, by the time they get to college or they grow up to be an archaeologist, then there creates other issues. We use the Common Core state. Carol says we use the Common Core state standards, and they include all the strands of math. See, Carol, you're in the system, so you know some of those facts that aren't always told in the news or out in the open. I think I hear a lot of people complain about some of those issues who have absolutely nothing to do with the school system or the education system. I've probably heard more people who quit school in the 8th grade complain about how things are taught in schools and people who actually, went all the way through the system. It should be required every single year, both math and science and history. But with history, I know that can change. Tina, and it should change, but we should still be teaching it. And honestly, we should be teaching more than we ever have. I think I'm going to jump off here and get busy. Oh, you're leaving. Oh, thank you. You're just going to dump me here. Diana, my son started failing miserably because they kept changing the way they were teaching math. Keep it basics. I agree. Diana, that was a big deal when I was in school. Almost every year they were teaching new math, a new way to do division, for example. We didn't have calculators or cell phones to do it. We were doing it by hand. But almost every year there was a new way to do it. I remember my dad trying to teach me how to do like division, or what they call it, long division back then. And and he'd look at my papers and he'd say, "What is this? This is not how it works." And he'd show me how to do it the way he learned it, and it worked. The answers were the same. It was just a different way to do it, and it was confusing. I don't know, Brenda, she's probably gone. Tina, you probably remember that, or maybe you didn't up in New York, but down here it seems like every year, every other year, they had new math, and that's what they called it. New way to do division, or a new way to write down basic add, multiply, divide. Different way to write it down, where somebody thought that'd be a better way to teach. Hey, Shelley, welcome in. There you go. An abacus never breaks down on you. You can always slide the next beat. I agree. Carol says my older kids took those classes anyway, but I suppose many kids don't. And I think you guys are talking about the same thing or something. That is something they've stopped doing, and I think this hurts schools. That's, again, my opinion. But when I went to school, we had to take physical education class every year, period. In high school, you couldn't graduate high school if you didn't. We don't do that anymore because we got to hurry up and teach something else. And I've seen other classes get done the same way. They don't teach above a certain level, say in math, because they got to teach something else. And I think that's really hurting the education systems down here, I think. Kay said, my dad taught me math his way. Well, that's kind of how I learned it too, Kay. No, we did. And I took early ed in college. It was very frustrating. Yeah. I'm not trying to skip anybody. If I do, I apologize. I'm just trying to hit when I see stuff pop up. I agree that they should teach the standard ways to solve math, but they should offer other strategies for kids that need them too. I agree. It's like teaching kids, you always got some kids that can be ahead of the class, and if you don't keep up with them, they get bored. And then sometimes they become the problem kid in the class. But it's not out of lack of effort, it's because they don't. I can't imagine. I had cousins that grew up literally that were my age that grew up in a 2-room schoolhouse. So you had first, second, third, fourth grade in one side of the building and fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth in the other. And while some of that makes sense to me, I also can't help but think that was confusing and boring for some kids. Good, Shelley. I hope you survived the storms and everything okay. I don't know exactly where you're at in Mississippi, but I know you guys got hammered down there last week. And yes, phys ed was getting out and being active. Now the quick phys ed is sitting in the classroom, learn how to score golf instead of going out and doing it. Yeah, something like that, Tina. And I think kids need that physical activity to get things going and to be healthier. And I think they need the break between classes to do, something a little different. And they just don't do it at all. I don't think my kids took any kind of physical education their whole time in high school. And I think it was sad. Yeah, we did too, Kay. That was always something you had. You had an English class at some point, be it essays or just reading or lit or whatever, and you had math and you had some kind of science and at least 2 years of history, I think. Shelley said she homeschooled her kids. And how did that work? I don't want you. You don't have to get too deep in it. The thing I've always worried about with homeschooling is how socially acclimated some kids are. Some kids, I've seen some kids that seem like they never got out of the house and really have a hard time adjusting when they have to go, sit in a larger classroom and that sort of stuff. Maybe that's not true. You would know better than me, so I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Social studies gets pushed aside at the elementary level here. We have the curriculum, but there's so little time to do it well. And we had social, that was another class I grew up having social studies. Probably, I don't know when they started, I don't know what year we started learning it, but I know it followed me through pretty much to high school. Diana says, I had an argument with the teacher because his answer was correct, but the way he got the answer was not. As long as he got the correct answer, why does it matter how he got it? I've had that argument too on my own. Thanks, all good here. I'm an hour from the coast. Okay, well, I'm glad you're okay. I actually realized that you were down there after it happened. And I meant to send you a note and check on you, but I may not have done that, so I apologize. But I'm glad you're okay. Let's see. Carol said that would make me, oops, that would make me mad too. If he understands and has a strategy that gets him to the right answer, why should they care? I think that's a valid point. I think sometimes they do need to learn. There are certain orders of things that dealing with math that they should learn, because I had to relearn that when I went back to college. And I think that stuff's good, but I agree. I think sometimes we have different ways of thinking through things. And Shelley said it was a challenge at first, but it was an awesome experience. Shelley, I don't. How many kids did you have, or did you teach? How many kids do you have that you worked with like that for homeschooling? One or two, or Carol, I won the argument. Good, good for you, Diana. Homeschooling is awesome as long as they get the social skills. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I was getting at, Kay. I've seen some kids that came out of homeschools that were really, really struggle socially with people and working around other people, working with other people. Once you go to college, it's a whole different thing anyway. And I've always wondered how the homeschool thing rotate, how that worked for people. Some I've seen it didn't seem to be working too well. And I think they were smart. I think they were just having other issues. I don't want to offend, and I don't mean to. I think a lot of you probably know how I stand on a lot of issues, but we don't usually talk about them here, and that's intentional. But when I went to school, as far as science was being taught, I was still being taught the basic Christian creation theory, and that's pretty much all I got, at least until I got out of 8th grade. I obviously disagree with that now. Didn't probably didn't. In fact, I disagreed with it then, but I wasn't old enough to make my point. But most of the kids, it didn't matter anyway. That's all they knew. Just say homeschooling needs to be done very intentionally. If parents put it in the effort to do all the academic, social things, it can be great. And did you go all the way through? How far did you go, Shelley? Can I ask? I mean, like first through 8th grade, or I guess you do high school or can. I'm not never. We didn't homeschool our kids, so I don't know. I've been around some very smart homeschool people, but absolutely no social skills. Yeah, that's what I was saying a minute ago, Kay. I have too, and worked with some, in fact, later on. And even though they'd gone to college, um, they still had issues with dealing with people one on one, especially. I'm sure you did a great job. Yeah, and I have to believe that too, Shelley. And I think there are a lot of parents who do a great job of teaching kids. I think there's some that don't put in the effort, and I wonder sometimes why they do it. I did my best, and my kids were smarter than kids older than them. Well, good. Oh, I just had that up there. Oh, it was up there twice. Well, I don't know why it was in there twice. Maybe we got you doubly good. Third grade through high school. Okay. I've known some people that, some families that did the lower grades with their kids, and then once they went to high school, they moved them up into the high school. So that's why I wondered. I know some, and I thought you could go all the way through high school. I wasn't sure. It may depend by state too, but and then again, maybe it doesn't. I know there are some states. Carol, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Shelley, since you've done it. Um, I think there are some states that have a pretty good organized or an organization within the state that works with homeschoolers, and the standards that things get taught. I think they probably do a pretty good job of that. Um, I think Brenda and I we're still advocates of the old way we got it. Everybody says public schools aren't worth a crap, and I'm not saying they haven't changed. I do agree that things have changed, but hell, I'm a product of that, and I think I came out of it pretty good. My kids were in dance and martial arts to keep them socialized. Well, that's good, Shelley. And Carol says it varies by state. I know there was some state that was doing homeschool, somebody that was doing homeschooling online. I'm not going to mention any names. I might not even remember which ones, who it was exactly, but I remember them talking about. They actually had. I want to say meetings, maybe online meetings, even then, where these that homeschool parents were supposed to go to or encouraged to attend to keep up to speed and make sure they were getting everything covered and getting all the paperwork and everything they needed. Some parents do homeschooling for the wrong reasons. They do it for control. Yes, they do, and I get that. But like Carol Shelley said, the parents have to put in the work. I think there are. I've met a few people that I think thought, one, they could do a better job than anybody else, and two, thought it would be easy, and then figured out it wasn't so easy, but were maybe down the road far enough they thought they couldn't turn back. And I think the kids suffer then. Schools aren't like that. Yeah, I know, Tina. That's why I backed up on what I was saying, but I think they could be. I really do. But that's just my opinion. I'm not school superintendent. And I probably wouldn't last very long if I was. One advantage of homeschooling is your kids are one on one instead of 1 to 20. That's a good point, Blue Nose or Chris. Again, as long as you're covering the subjects well. I mean, and again, not to offend anybody, but some people are better teachers than others. I mean, I think most of you would probably agree with that, but maybe not. But I mean, everybody out there is not equal when it comes to teaching skills. I might suck at it, or I might be pretty good. Brenda might suck at it, or vice versa. Or compared to the lady down the road is teaching her kids, we just might be different, and some people are more adept at it than others. I've always wanted to be a teacher. I'm not sure I've got the patience. I'd like to try sometimes, but and I've thought about doing that here, not teaching, but maybe tutoring some students, looking into that as a after school kind of thing. I don't know if it would happen. I've worked with Boy Scouts to do projects and merit badges and that kind of thing, and I'm not saying that's the same as teaching school, but I enjoy working with kids and I enjoy working with young people, or for that matter, anybody. But so I don't know. I think it varies by person though. Some people are really good at it, some aren't. I'm pretty sure that any of us watching your shows are positive you're good. Oh well, thank you, Tina. I appreciate that. Actually, that actually means a lot to me. I've always wanted to be a teacher. I mean, obviously, I didn't do it, so I guess I shouldn't say I've always wanted to be. Other things have always kind of popped up, but in the background, I've always wanted to do that. And I honestly thought about doing that, going back to get my certificate a few years ago, and maybe trying to do some teaching. I wasn't sure at what level I wanted to do that. I might be better off if I was in a lower college level, or at least in high school. I don't know. Well, I try, Tina. No, I know it's never too late, Diana, but you know, and this is just part of this is up here. Um, I've had so many physical disabling issues the last few years, breaking stuff. Spinal cord injury that really slowed my life down. Wrecking the lawnmower like an idiot, that didn't help. That's put me a year behind everything I wanted to do. So, you know what, Kay? That's hot. That's a lot of why I do my show and how I do it. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I've always wanted it to be. I've always wanted people to have a chance to maybe get something out of it, and me too. But about teaching my kids was enough. I couldn't do a whole class of youngins. Well, that's good. That's why I'm not sure either, Shelley. I mean, there's part of me would like to give it a try, but you've had experience, so maybe that is enough. Maybe that's what I should do. Sometimes being forced to do something makes you feel physically better. You know what? You're probably right, Diana. And Brenda and I both have finally, we've started doing chair yoga, which may not sound like much, but I have trouble walking and standing for a long time still. I'm trying to strengthen my legs again and trying to get them back to where that's not such an issue. 10 years ago, I used to hike in the mountains, and today I can't hardly walk my own property. So, the chair yoga seems to be making my legs feel better, making me feel better. So I agree. I'm making myself do it. And Brenda's going, and I think we're going to stick with it. So I'm going to figure it out one way or another. I can't wait too much longer to get better. I think I've been waiting on my body to heal on its own, and I can't. That's not going to happen. Well, I tell you what, Tina, if you never learn anything from me but the difference between a theory and a hypothesis, hell, my day is done. I'm happy because that drives me nuts. People call things a theory and it's not. And oh man, so good. I'm glad. Don't let any injury slow you down. That's you know what, Chris, I've said that and I say that still, and you're right. I agree with you 100%, but I have done that. I have let it slow me down. And that's, I mean, I don't know. In one way, if I hadn't gotten hurt 3 years ago, or my back hadn't a bone spur hadn't magically or mysteriously appeared on my spinal cord and decided to, make me half paralyzed. Who knows? I mean, and I've lost my chain of thought. So, um, what did you say? Let me read that again. Oh, don't let anything beat me down. Yeah, I didn't. I was. You're right. I mean, I think you're right. But it's been hard. It's just been hard, and I think you probably know that better as well as anybody here. I mean, you've done a lot yourself and overcome a lot of things that I feel like sometimes I have no reason to bitch. I mean, or complain. What's it called? Carry yoga, chair yoga, CHAIR yoga. It's basically you do most of the stuff sitting, or or using the chair, or using the chair as a support thing, and I'm getting a lot of dang it. And it's actually more physically you're actually doing more than I thought you. I mean, you're actually getting something out of it. It's not just sitting in the chair and moving around. And I really liked the chair yoga we did the first day where we got to beat on the drum. That was fun. Yes, Diana, it's extremely easy to get stuck in that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If I can clear my throat, hang on. Excuse me. I don't know if I hadn't. If part of me would have to say that if my spinal cord injury hadn't happened, I may not have been on the internet today. I might not have been doing this. Of course, I might have been on a motorcycle trip with my buddy Phil, and I certainly would have been doing some of that in my retirement. But I might not have been online. This might never have happened. So in some ways, I had to take a different path for a while, and I'm doing that, and I hope to continue doing that. But I also hope to start doing some other things. Life gets in the way so damn bad. If it's not money or health, it's something else. Seems like. Okay, where am I at? That's just one of the things I learned today. Oh, it's in just one of your shows. Okay, thanks. Because my hubby gets depressed about not being able to move. Tina, I absolutely understand. Oh yeah, I've got one, Blue Nose. I was actually trying to gear up for a little bit of that when things kind of took a different turn. I've got a GoPro, and I've got a little Olympus camera that I bought that I can use on the motorcycle. Uh, I'm ready if I can get back on it, or buy a 3-wheeler. Right now, financially, I just can't afford to buy a 3-wheeler, so I either got to get back on my 2-wheeler or sell it and quit, which I don't want to do. I was riding a motorcycle at the age of 14, and not taking long trips, but being pretty free to go and do and see things. And I had spots in there where I didn't own one, or for some reason, I wasn't riding. And then I would come back, and I think the blue one, which I don't talk about, but I call Connie, Connie Blue. In some ways, I think that was after I got laid off and was trying to go through college, and I got that bike, and it really helped me get through those years. So, and I've said, I think she saved my life. That's probably an exaggeration, but she certainly didn't hurt. And that's why I told Brenda not long ago that I'll probably never sell that motorcycle. I just feel very attached to it. Might be silly to most people, but I get attached to things, even if they're mechanical. I still think I think mechanical stuff may have as good a soul as anybody I know. So, Tina said we were back then. I rode my 10-speed per mile. Yeah, we were so much freer. I mean, whether it was a bicycle or a scooter or whatever. And nobody, of course, we've talked about that. When I was a young kid, my cousin and I'd hop on a pony and take off and be gone from daylight till dark and get home in time to have dinner or something, and then nobody seemed to think a thing about it. I mean, I've often wondered if we couldn't all been silly, knocked in the head somewhere in a creek. Nobody would ever come to find us, I don't guess. Exactly. Exactly, Chris. But Tina, I don't know if I am the guy, but if Chuck ever wants to talk about that, I'm free because I get it. I do. It is very depressing, and sometimes it's hard to get out of it. I mean, it is. So I don't know if he ever wants to talk. We can certainly get together and do that. Teaching my kids how to think, not what to think, was important. That's a good way to put that, Shelley. In fact, I may write that down. Thank you. Thank you for that little gem there, Shelley. I appreciate. I like that. I mean, we have been talking about that. Just the way she said it clicked. It was concise and to a point. When I tend to over exaggerate. So, Diana, I'm gonna plead ignorance here, and I'm not. I hope I'm not under today's circumstances and everything going on like this. I hope you don't take this wrong way because I don't mean it. But in Canada, is homeschooling a big deal or um, common, or is that? I mean, I'm guessing you guys do it just like we do. Yeah, it was, Tina. I mean, I've been saying that or beating around the bush about it, but that's just a good way to put it. So thank you, Shelley. Um, and the reason I'm asking because I don't know anything about the public school system up there. I don't know. I've met and worked with some Canadians in my life, and I thought they were all smart and usually sharp as a whip. I figured they were doing something right. I've met some really good mechanics from up there back when I was still in the airplane business, but I never thought about it. Homeschooling and public schooling. If it's each state has their own rules. Yeah, I just wonder, Shelley, how much that confuses matters, um, or if it does, maybe it doesn't. But I think that I think on the larger scale of our education system in this country, if all 50 states allow homeschooling, then all 50 states have a whole different curriculum or a whole different standard that they go by. I'm not sure that helps us as a whole. It'd be, I mean, I think that I do think some things need to be kind of standardized, but I don't know if homeschooling is that way or not. I think for the most part we were lucky. Our kids went to good schools. We were at the right place at the right time. Um, Diana said it's more of a thing. Yeah, I think it probably picked up here too during COVID. Lots of people had to start because the schools were only open to essential worker children. Some kids were successful and continued to learn at home. Yeah, and I bet somewhere down the road there's going to be a study done about how much that affected overall. I don't want to say intelligence level. That's not the right way to put it. but just where we were at in that cohort of people in that certain age group that went through that period of time when things were so screwed up. Um, I don't know. I bet there's a study there for sure. In fact, I'm sure there is. I have no doubt about it. I think that applies to a lot of things. I'd already retired when COVID hit, but I know a lot of my coworkers that I stayed in contact with, um, even working and on a job, it changed. It changed. It just changed their whole life, really. One of the great things about this country is that we have 50 labs to test hypotheses. Well, that's true, Tina. You can get the best plans by testing it. The more testing you do, usually the better of the results. I won't deny that. They got to be good testing, though. But no, that's a good point, Tina. I have to write that down too. I literally retired 2 months before COVID. I think my guardian angel daily. I was gone a year, I guess, when things started going, kind of downhill, and I was already down with my back because that's when I had my spinal cord injury. Um, was in the 6 months or so before COVID hit, and they put me in the hospital to do my back surgery right in the middle of a COVID outbreak here in Knoxville. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to be in the hospital till I die because Brenda can't come see me. I'm never going to get out of here. Fortunately, they got me in, did my surgery. I recovered enough. They sent me home. Maybe quicker than they normally would have. I was there. I was just there. I think I was just there one night, one day and a night, and then out. Maybe 2 nights, but they didn't want me there any longer than I had to because they were locking down parts of the hospital, and I really was concerned because at that point we were already hearing stories about people once they got in the hospital they were there because they were either infected or possibly could spread, and there was so much concern about that. And you saw families outside the hospital waving through the windows and that kind of stuff. Anyway, that didn't happen. I got in and got out, but I think the fact that I was down also kept Brenda and I out from the public for a long time. Probably didn't hurt us. I mean, that probably helped us in a lot of ways during that time. And my kids came home and told me the teacher was telling them that American Indians were savages. I put a halt to it. Oh my! One reason I decided to homeschool. Well, that's interesting, Shelley. You and I are really gonna have to sit down and talk about this someday. I'm fascinated, and that's the kind of thing when I say when I said I was still being taught creation theory and science in school early on. Uh, history was like that too. I can probably remember those things being taught, and I didn't like them, and I complained about them to, like my parents or teachers, but it didn't really do any good back then. I partially agree with the 50 labs. The problem is all the kids who get the teaching that turned out to be bad. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that 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 theory, that hypothesis. You do run into that because if you get a lot of bad results, that's not helping anybody. Blue Nut, Chris, you talking about? No, you weren't talking about when I was in the hospital. I was working in a personal care home, and the things I saw messed me up, changed me forever. Well, I'll tell you one of the things that happened to me, and this is, I'm sure there's probably some partially my fault and partially not, but my dad was in a home that was part of the VA system, and I couldn't go see him, and he passed away, and didn't get to go see him, and that sucked. And we were enough distance apart that I wasn't seeing him regular enough as it was, but I couldn't even get up and walk, and then everything was locked down for COVID, and I'm sure I'll regret that till I die. But I've kind of made my peace with it. There wasn't a lot I could have done about it. Geez, that's awful. That would not fly around here now. Carol, I worry that there's still too many places where it does fly. That's a personal issue, I guess, for me. But that's, yeah. I was that kid in school. Again, I'm not trying to sound pretentious or braggadocious, but I was a kid that questioned that kind of thing in school. Didn't always go over so well. I can remember sitting in Sunday school and asking those kind of questions, and then it's sort of like maybe we need to have some kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Oh crap! I might need to be cleansed or something. Carol said, Diana, that had to be hard. Danny worked in a residential treatment home during that time. He ended up quitting after the pandemic eased up and returned to his old manual labor job. I cannot, you know what? I cannot imagine how hard that was on a lot of people. And the hospital workers who worked through it and saw so many people die and were so confined and I think that had to be horrible for lots of people. And that's horrible thing. We didn't do that. If someone was on the end of life, they wanted to. Like I said, in the end, I couldn't move. I wasn't able to get around, so I was slowed down to begin with. I might have could have gotten up there and gotten in if I could have gotten there and done that, but it happened so quick, and he didn't die of COVID, which I was happy about. I guess about that, but I mean. There probably had, that's what I said, Don. I feel bad because there probably was a way. I didn't push it hard enough. Didn't even know if I needed to push it at the moment. And, my brother never even said anything about whether he got to be there with him at the end or not. I need to ask him that. My own guilt probably kept me from doing that. Oh, he was with COVID. Mark has a story. Hey, D, welcome in, Dave. Good to see you, buddy. We're just class is over. We're just chit chatting at the moment. Yeah, I'm sorry too, Kay. I know why you feel. Mark had an uncle that passed away a couple of years ago. It wasn't in the peak of COVID. It was after, but he had, I can't remember what got him in the hospital. I don't think it was COVID, but he caught COVID, and I don't know if he's military. I don't know if he was in a VA center hospital in Southern Ohio or if he was just in a regular general hospital, but they actually moved him to a different hospital, and none of his family knew where he was because they weren't allowing. I think they had him locked off. They had people still locking people off or trying to keep them isolated, and I think they didn't, to hear him tell it and to hear them tell it. And I've talked to the family besides Mark. They're still very bitter about the whole thing. I don't know. It was messed up. Okay, it's one of the terrible and frustrating things about the last 5 years. Yeah, it's a scar, Tina. I think that's a scar we'll be scratching on for a long time. If you know what I mean by that, it's going to be tender. It's not going to. That's not going to heal. A lot of us are. I think a lot of people, maybe younger people, maybe people my age. I don't know, but I think it's going to leave a mark, if you will. Excuse me, guys. Allergies, man. It's spring is hitting. I'm just last few days have been hard. I started sneezing the other day and just thought I wasn't going to stop. Pollen is already thick around here. Cedar pollen is hitting right now, and it's everywhere. We're going to get to that point real soon now where all the cars, look green because of the pollen that's on everything. Okay, you were not to blame. I know your heart hurts, but you couldn't have known. I will always feel guilty because it was my fault he was even in the hospital. Cat. Well, I don't know I don't know the circumstances, Kay, but I bet it wasn't just your fault. You can't do that to yourself. I mean, and I'm a good one to talk. I'm doing enough of that. Maybe I can talk because I do enough of that myself. I beat myself up enough and feel guilty about enough stuff, and that I'm not sure that's one we can wear. But again, like I said, it has left a mark on a lot of us. So I agree. I think we'll be suffering consequent decisions made for decades. I think so. And even without that, just the fact that it happened. I mean, I can't imagine what I can't. I'm sure that when the Spanish flu hit, and in this country, and I'm sure it was the same way. I mean, I'm sure that left, and they didn't know. I mean, they didn't know how to treat stuff like that even then very well. And you were doing what you'd been told was best from those who you understood to know better. That's true too, Tina. It's it's a crazy mixed up world, this modern world. We've outsmarted our own self in so many ways. We've created all the means and methods for anything like COVID to pick up and just move around quickly all over the world. I mean, think about it. From the time and I'm not going to get into I don't want to get into all the speculation or discussion about it, but I mean, think about it. You discover a disease one day, and the next day you find out it's already it's in. Let's say it's in China, and the next day 20 people fly in from some city in China where they've been over there doing business or on vacation because they're just seeing the sights of ancient China, historic, and suddenly you've got COVID here or whatever disease X, because we can hop on a plane and be here in a few hours. Maybe the incubation time is 12 hours. By the time you fly from Hong Kong back to the United States, you're hot. And I mean, if you don't know something's going on, that's difficult to stop. Sorry about that. I had something locked in, didn't realize I'd left it on. Yeah, one of my biggest regrets was letting so many of my family members pass away without gathering as much historical knowledge from them as I could. I wish I had done that. I wanted to sit down with my uncles as they grew older, and I actually had already thought about this, but wasn't living here at the time or close enough. I wanted to get some more of my family history, at least the oral history and the stories. I had a couple of uncles that used to tell great tall tales. I've mentioned that before, I think. I wish I had gotten to write those stories all down, other than just the ones I remembered. And that's a good point, Blue Nose or Chris. And you know what? we didn't handle that very well either. I don't think this country. I think this country gets to wear that one. My sister-in-law believes she had COVID the December before the world knew about it. She did all. I heard other people that said that. Okay, I think my brother-in-law, I think, said the same thing. He commented once right after things hit that he thought he had it, in December before it really hit hard or something, somewhere in that range. And I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe not. It's hard to say, but it is possible. Because again, back to what I just said, I don't know. I mean, they can try to pinpoint when it first broke out here, but I don't know that they'll ever be able to prove that entirely. Like I said, people move around today. It's nothing for somebody to get on that plane and circumnavigate the globe in just a few days, and you could spread something all the way around the world in 48 hours. I missed something Tina said up here. Let's see. It is sometimes just when we think we've learned all we can about a subject, something new pops up in her face. And that's true too, Tina. No. She was in Vegas for a trade show and came back with it. Well, that would be a good reason or a good possibility. I don't, who knows? That may very well be the case. We know a lot more about it now, and at the same time, we probably don't know a lot about it. But I mean, it was pretty obvious that some people got hit a lot harder than other people. And I think Brenda and I got lucky. We worked hard to isolate ourselves for what we could, and I was not able to move or get around and do things. So, we were isolated almost by. We had to. I mean, I couldn't get out, or just barely could. And when we were able to start getting out, if we went to the grocery store, kind of the time I'm running I'm trying to think how events actually unfolded. Because I do remember a time when I'd get up and go to the grocery store at 6 a.m. So there was nobody else there hardly. And I said, we were in Florida and there were so many really sick people walking around more than, oh, wow. Oh, you're probably right, Diana. So you guys were, I'm going to make an assumption here based on facts not yet in evidence, but you were at Disney World. See, I think Disney World and places like that at a point were probably great depositories or whatever of the viruses. Even other than that, New York was nuts for over a year. I bet. It's pretty crazy down here too. I heard, Diana, I did hear other people talked about that, and I swear to you, I believe I watched people online who were ignoring a lot of the precautions, and then they turned around and had COVID. I don't know that anybody I knew that from the Disney community that passed away. I don't think, but I knew a lot of people that got sick. Yeah, Tina, exactly. And that makes a big difference. I mean, Disney World's pretty much the same way. Maybe it wasn't during that time period, but I can't imagine. I don't know if you're talking about just the state in general or New York City, but the mix of just people in general coming and going in a place like New York, I don't know how you can not control how you could control anything like that. Yep. Let's see. Yep, we came back, and 1 month later, everything shut down. I do have a laugh at how some people covered up during that time. A guy in the grocery store had a mask, gloves up to his upper arm, and flip flops. Well, you can't get diseases through your feet. Okay, just kidding. Shelley said I needed to run in. I need to. Oh, well, thanks for stopping by, Shelley. It's always a pleasure to have you in. And I really would like to talk to you about some of that school stuff sometime if you ever have time and feel like discussing any of it. Just because I like to get different opinions and of people that do different things like that I wonder about. So, and you're a data source, if you will. Everybody saying bye, Shelley. Well, guys, I guess I ought to say goodbye to everybody and let everybody go. We're just sitting here chewing the fat, as we say down here now, and I actually appreciate everybody just hanging around because I don't know what we're doing the rest of the day. It got cold here again. I don't know if it did where everybody's at, but it got, well, down in the zero or freezing range of things. I mean, we popped up to like 75 one day, and boom, then we're back down to 32 or 29 overnight. I came out here, I turned the heat off out here in the library because it had gotten in the 70s during the day and it was hot out here. So I turned the heat off. Next day I come out here and it's 32, and I about froze my butt off trying to get used to the temp, and I had to turn the heaters back on, and it doesn't heat up real quick. So now I've been trying to get it adjusted. I've got a heater right behind me, right there, so that I can kind of adjust it a little bit different, not keep it too hot, but not let it get too cold. Anyway, all right, guys, I'm sure everybody has some stuff they need to do besides sit around and talk to me and or keep me occupied. But thank you, Shelley. And yeah, stupid weather, Don. I don't know where you guys are at. You guys are probably still cold, but it had gotten really warm here, which I thought was too early. But that happens here a lot in spring. Spring here is always a bit of a roller coaster. And what it's done is, as we've seen the last couple of weeks, bring in some nasty storms. I mean, when you get those temperatures hitting, button up against cold air coming down or from the west or in the north, and then and all that moisture out of the Gulf, and it just creates, talk about a giant petri dish for nasty weather, and you just don't know what's going to happen. I have to give Ryan all credit, for a guy who, I don't know his whole story on his weather career, but he was setting online live just about 24 hours, I think, one day last week, while all that weather was creeping up through out of Louisiana through Mississippi and on up. He really, and he was really helping. I think he helped a lot of people. I know he was trying to get people to take shelter in a couple of places that got hammered. So I hope it helped. You have lots of flowers blooming, Kay. We don't yet, but we're right on the cusp of that. We're starting to. Tornado season just started. Yes, it has definitely started. And the new tornado alleys that we seem to have in this country now that are so different than when I grew up. And I've talked about it the other night when those tornadoes were hitting, when all that weather was coming through Mississippi. By the time it got to us, it had slowed down a lot, but there were still storms and a front, and there was still a lot going on. And tornado warnings and threats were way down compared to the western part of the state. But the wind came galloping over the hill here that night, and I thought it was going to lift the roof right off the house. Oh, 2 more months before Diana sees flowers. I'm sorry, Diana. We'll try not to rub it in. Buds on the trees. Well, we're getting that too, Tina. I'm starting to see a lot of it'll be full green up, as they used to say around here, soon. It won't be long. We've got not dogwoods. We got redbuds starting to bloom. Dogwoods will hit next, or tree wise, as far as blooming. Well, the maple trees have little flowers on them, but you don't pay much attention to them. Anyway, it's a interesting time of year. It used to be my favorite time of the year. Allergies didn't used to bother me though. Now they do. So I'm not so sure anymore. But then again, I think allergies bother me just about year round. Oh, Brenda wants to get some hyacinths, Kay. She was every time we drive by somewhere it's got them, she wants me to let her out so she can steal somebody's bulbs. My grandmother and grandfather used to have a bed, Kay, where they raised nothing but irises, and they had they had like a row for different cultivars, varieties, and no, they had some beautiful irises. And we used to have a couple of bulbs that came out of their garden. I don't know if we still have those or not, if we brought them with us, but I think Brenda dug some of them up. You're all making me sad by talking about flowers, so I think y'all should send me some. Oh, well, maybe we can work on that, Diana. Sorry. I guess we shouldn't rub it in. But look at it this way. You've got all that beautiful snow so much longer than we do. Which I actually meant to ask, did anybody here get snow this week? I mean, there's parts of the states, I think Iowa and maybe Chris, did you guys get snow up your way? I agreed, Chris, with what you're saying there. I used to love to sit and watch thunderstorms from a distance because I'm like you. I think don't like the destruction, but I think there's a magnificent beauty of it and power. Oh my gosh, so powerful. My snow is yellow. You can blame Walter for that. We got a few flakes, Tina said, but nothing stayed. Chris said he got them dusty and melted within an hour. Oh, wow. See, my kids decided, I think the kids were traveling to Wisconsin when either right as that was blowing through, they didn't have any trouble getting to Wisconsin. We were a little bit worried about that, but I think they might have been there right before it passed over them, and apparently it didn't do much there either. We're supposed to get snow today. Oh, Diana. There's some flowers from Carol. How sweet. Hey, I didn't even think about that. I don't even see a way for me to do that. Probably over here somewhere. Yeah, I can do it here. Wow, those flowers look so much different on that screen as compared to this one. Over here, I'm in StreamYards, and over here I'm in YouTube. I'm just on YouTube, and they're much nicer on YouTube. I would send some too, but I can't find them. There's a bear. I could send a bear. Hey, I got a question before I go. Oops. Not that it makes any difference, and not that any of us can do anything about it, I don't reckon. Oh, tulips. What do you guys think about them taking out in Disney World? How much they're changing? Taking out Tom Sawyer Island and the river and the riverboat and all that stuff. Because I'll be honest with you, it breaks my heart. I think it's a mistake, but it's not like they're going to listen to me. Although I did hear something the other night that said there was enough people upset that they were starting to hear it. So I don't know. Okay, I love to see those pictures when you get them. I love irises. Mine are the common purple and white ones. Well, Carol, we'll have to send you some someday. We'll get some down this way. Iris is the state flower of Tennessee. So perhaps we can come up with some varieties that you don't have and send them up there. Hey, I got it right. I said varieties that time. I was trying to think of the word. I said cultivars a while ago, which is still correct. But Yeah, my grandparents just, I guess it was my grandmother. She just loved irises. So granddad had a little garden out in the front yard beside the driveway where there'd been some outbuildings at one time. And it was right beside the road they lived on, which was a small country road, gravel most of my life. And I mean, almost one car wide, only a little bit wider. And there wasn't another house back then within a couple of miles of his house, probably. I mean, it was still pretty rural. But anyway, they had the garden out by the road, and that's where they had their irises. Like, hey, there's Surf Bum. Hey, John, welcome back. If you been here the whole time. Lack of participation in the chat. Been listening and helping mom clean the house. Leaving tomorrow for Las Vegas. What are you doing in Las Vegas? Oh, just going out to gamble, or you got a big? I start saying that for work, but you're on the retired wagon, I think. Carol, I've only seen this color at my grandparents and at my house. What color was that, Kay? I wish they'd slow down the changes. I like new things, but I'm really sad about. Muppet. But yes, I'm sad about that, Carol. I am, but I'm way more sad about the that whole Tom Sawyer's Island, Rivers of America thing was to me is a anchor to Walt, and I think when they rip that out, I think that's going to really lose another piece of what I consider the heart of the Magic Kingdom. I'm not. I don't like it. I wish I could get down there before it's all gone. I don't think we will. Oh, salmon color. Okay. But it really gambling and meeting no Air Force buddy. Well, cool. Have fun, John. And I'm sure you will. Where are you staying out there, if you don't mind saying? Anyway, I don't. 6 weeks from today, oh, you're coming. Oh, I forgot about that. Now, are you going to be on the end of the state close to me, John? I can't remember. I think we talked about that once. I don't know if you're coming over to see your brother or not. If you get down this way, let me know. If there's any way we could hook up, have lunch or something, that'd be great. I'd love to. Bye, Diana. We're not going to be here much longer. I said we were going to sign off and we didn't. So she's got to go buy flowers. Make Mike buy you some flowers. Make him give up a donut and buy you some flowers. I think Carol or Kay, I think I've seen those. I think we've got those. Some people have those around here, but I'm not positive. I'll be at Pinehurst playing golf for 5 days with my Sunday league. Oh, okay. Wow. Cool. Bellagio. Oh, okay. That's fun. I don't think it's there now, John, but Bellagio for a while had the art of the motorcycle on display there for a long time. And we were a couple of buddies of mine, and I, Phil, and my buddy Henry, we actually talked about going out there just to see that while it was out there. They'd built a hall for it. And I don't know if that was going to be a permanent display or not, but if it is, it's cool. I know you're not a motorcycle guy, but I finally got to see it, and they brought it to one year in Bike Week. They brought it to not Orlando, to Daytona area, and we got to go see it. And man, was that cool! Golly, Mom, I've got a lot of pictures of that too that I need to find. I'd love to have gone to see it when it was at the Guggenheim in New York, but that was too big of a stretch. But it's maybe you don't think motorcycles can be art, but man, they had some really interesting stuff. Really interesting. I've got a pen that I bought just to commemorate being there when it was in Florida, so I got to see it. And I think they brought some of it from Las Vegas, maybe. So maybe it came out of there, but I was thinking they took it back, put it back out there on display. Maybe not. I'd have to look it up. Who knows? But we liked it. We sure enjoyed it. As in Phil and I and Henry. Henry maybe less so, but Phil and I did for sure. All right, guys, I'm going to say it again. We'll get off here. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, pass it around. Tell somebody else how to check us out. Again, I'm not trying to build a great, big, huge show or following. I don't know what I'd do if I had it. But then again, at the same time, I like to think other people might learn from it. You had a CZ250 dirt bike, John. That's cool. That was an exotic motorcycle when I was growing up. They made the best dirt bikes for a long time. European stuff was way ahead of the Japanese stuff, and then the Japanese caught up and pretty much zipped right on past. All right, everybody, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Have a good week next week. You know what? I just realized there probably won't be a show next Saturday, unless I do a live show. We're going to be in the Gatlinburg area. We had a sort of a vacation thing that we had to do. We wanted to go to Washington, D.C. and see the museums, but we just didn't think we were going to be able to do that. So we took a deal here and close. So we're going to be in Gatlinburg for that weekend. So I doubt Saturday I'll be doing anything, but I might take my gear and try to do a live feed from somewhere. I'm sure I can get enough phone signal to do that. So I don't know. We may do something. I may do something from Gatlinburg, but we'll see. But otherwise, I forgot to mention that to Mark. I'll have to let him know we're not doing anything next week. But anyway, thanks for being here today, guys. Have a great week. Be safe out there. Take care of everybody. And hope to see y'all again when I am back on the air. And see you real soon. I should be more prepared to hit the end button before I always say see